Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, the rain poured down in sheets, creating squiggly patterns on the windscreen window. The sequestered country road was riddled with potholes that were now filled with muddy, rather murky water. Avril's white Hyundai was covered in dirty splotches, almost as if a kid had deliberately thrown brown paint over her vehicle. She tried her utmost, of course, to allow her car to glide smoothly over the uneven road, and as it did so, it rattled and jolted, rather like jelly beans in a glass jar. So much so, in fact, that the passengers on the back seat, that were 6-year-old Laurie and 10-year-old Sam, began to bounce around rather precariously, both of them giggling, as if they thought they were riding one of those carousel horses on the fairground. But let's just say the horses on this carousel were more than a little frisky. It certainly seemed that since they'd left the main highway a while back and eagerly traversed down these intrepid tributary country-like roads, the journey had turned exceedingly quickly from smoothly reliable to chaotically unpredictable, as the rubber tires of Avril's SUV certainly didn't appreciate wading through these large ponds of water that had flooded the road magnanimously. It certainly didn't help, of course, that the heavens were not on their side, for they had unabashedly opened with formidable intent, so the rain had just bolted down. In the distance you could hear the rumble of thunder, and the light of the afternoon began to fade, becoming significantly more subdued, almost as if it was early evening. The rain continued to pelt down, while the windscreen wipers earnestly struggled to fight back the constant deluge. Avril was playing some soft rock music on the radio, but the rain, as it continued pelting down, had successfully drowned out any background noises, as it was singing its own tune, it would seem. "Are you all right, kids?" asked Avril, looking back at her children, her face dappled with the maternal concern. "We're fine, Mum," said little Sam, who was staring out of his window, his nose pressed against the glass. He stared out the glass pane, his keen eyes crowned with a profound sense of curiosity, as if he was soaking up the scenery around him like a sponge. "Mummy, why's the road so bumpy?" he asked. "There's a sloshy mud all over the place, and the rain just doesn't seem to stop. Why won't the rain stop, Mummy? It always stops back in Toronto." "Sometimes it just rains, doesn't it?" said Avril. "I know the weather appears abysmal, love, and I apologize for that, but there's nothing we can do about it right now because we're caught up in it. I never imagined we'd get stuck in this downpour like this, but you must remember, Sam, this isn't Toronto. At home the roads are nice and smooth, so they're easy to navigate. The reason I'm driving with such due caution is we're in a remote area far away off the beaten track, and I don't want to get our tires stuck in a muddy ditch somewhere, or then I'm going to have to call someone out to help. So I'm erring on the side of caution. because I don't want that to happen. I guess not too many people use these roads, so they don't bother to spend money on fixing them up. They're remote, that's why, and they're not very comfortable to drive down, especially when the weather is behaving as badly as it is now." "But why won't they fix the road up?" asked Sam. "Just because people don't use the road often doesn't mean it shouldn't be fixed." "You echo my sentiments exactly, love. I wish I could answer your question. But sometimes, when the authorities fix and repair roads, some roads, such as this, far off the beaten track, obviously get overlooked and forgotten about, don't they? Think about your father, for example, when he does those fix-up jobs around the house, although God knows when he last did anything at all. But he leaves the least important jobs until last. Some things he still hasn't done, and he's left them on the back burner for years. I've been begging your father to repaint the postbox, for example. I'm sure you must have noticed our postbox has become incredibly rusty. But your father doesn't see that as an important job to do. I don't think the roads around here, likewise, are considered by the authorities to be on their most important list, much like our postbox is. But let's just say we make the most of a bad situation, don't we?" "I think it's silly," said Sam. "All roads should be fixed no matter where they are, just like Daddy should paint our postbox. I've seen how rusty it's become. Everybody else's postbox is painted nicely. Ours should be too." "Well, you should speak to your father about that. Believe me, I've tried. I've even been thinking of painting the damn thing myself, because that postbox is in shoddy condition. It's an embarrassment." "I want to pee, Mummy," came little Laurie's urgent voice in the back of the car. "I need to pee, Mummy," she insisted again. Avril inwardly grimaced. She knew if she didn't stop the car at once, in the pouring rain, that little Laurie would pee all over the back seat. She had never known a child to have such a contrary, very fickle bladder. It would seem Laurie always needed to go to the toilet at the most inopportune times, like when they were driving on the middle of the highway, or caught up in heavy congested traffic. The last time Laurie had relieved herself over the back seat, the car had smelt of ammonia for months afterwards, and no matter how much air freshener Avril had put in the car, the rank smell refused to abate. She had recently lifted a girlfriend of hers from work, dropping her off at home, which was streets away from where she lived, and her friend had said, "My God! What is that odious, foul smell, Avril, in your car? It smells like a cat litter box that hasn't been cleaned in months." Avril had shamefully blamed the smell on their golden Labrador Jellicoe, who was currently patiently sitting on the front seat next to her, staring out of the window, his dark, soulful eyes watching the rain trickling down the windscreen like long, lonely tears. The dog, as usual, was causing no trouble at all, and as for his impeccable toilet routine, he could have taught Laurie a thing or two, for never once had Jellicoe ever peed in the house. Avril had felt bad blaming the smell on her dog, but admitting to her friend that her 6-year-old had peed out a lake on the back seat of her car was not something she cared to share with her. Her friend might believe that Avril had failed in her responsibilities to successfully toilet train her little girl. Avril knew Laurie's weak bladder was not her fault, and she didn't want her 6-year-old to be wearing nappies. The very idea was ridiculous. But this daughter of hers had become a liability on every single road trip she made with her children, when her bladder seemed to have a mind of its own and began to demand everyone's undivided attention. Avril quickly ground the high undie to a sharp, rather bumpy stop that had everybody suddenly thrust forward in their seats with a mighty jerk, as she hurriedly slammed on the brakes. It was still, of course, pouring with rain, but better her daughter relieve herself outside the car than all over the leather seats in the back, even if Laurie was to get soaked to the skin in the process. Avril could not face the disenchanting prospect of her car smelling of ammonia for months to come. Sometimes you did what you had to do, but why the hell did it have to be raining like this, making everything on this trip 100 times more tiresomely complicated, to such an extent that even her visibility was impaired due to this deluge. "Laurie, will you get out of the car right now?" Avril demanded, in a no-nonsense tone of voice. "I don't want you pee-peeing over the back seat. You're a big girl now. You don't need to wet yourself, do you? Big girls like you don't wet themselves. Only babies do that." Jellicoe let out an excited woof, as if the invitation to pee-pee had been extended to him as well. "Not you, Jellicoe," said Avril, putting a firm hand on her dog to steady his enthusiasm, and Jellicoe immediately quietened down on his owner's commands, realizing that he was obviously not included in the fun that this moment so clearly invited. "Go on, Laurie. Get out of the car, will you? I want you to get out of the car now. And do what you need to do, for God's sake, and be quick about it." "But it's raining, Mummy. I'm going to get soaking wet." "It's too bad, Laurie. You should have thought about that at our last road stop, shouldn't you? You're not going to pee-pee on the back seat, and that is final. Last time I couldn't get rid of the abhorrent smell you left behind for months on end. It's not happening again. Not on my watch, anyway." "You heard, Mummy," said Sam. "You must get out of the car now." His nose wrinkled up in sheer disgust at the very thought of his sister peeing all over him. "You're not going to pee over the back seat like you did last time. The smell was rank." What was wrong with his sister, he wondered. They had stopped at a rest stop a couple of hours earlier, and his sister hadn't wanted to go then. But now she decided this was the perfect time, when everyone was tightly cooped up in the car together in the pouring rain, trying to find the whereabouts of a remote cabin. Sam practically pushed his sister out of the door. He was terribly afraid that she might suddenly lose control over her bladder. Laurie belligerently stuck out her tongue at her brother. "I'm getting out," she said in a squeaky voice. "You don't have to be so mean, Sam. I can't help it if I need to pee-pee." Laurie was clutching her flowery dress to her lower abdomen, as if trying to prevent the river within her from bursting its banks. Avril sighed with relief as her daughter climbed out of the car. At least one disaster had been averted for now. Avril assumed that Laurie would be squatting outside the door of the car to relieve herself as quickly as she could, and then obediently get straight back in. But 6-year-old Laurie did nothing of the kind. Laurie incongruously waddled into the middle of the road, like a duck, still clutching her skirt. And then she bent down, pulled down her pants, and began to squat in the middle of the road in front of Avril's Hyundai, as if making a complete spectacle of herself. She seemed completely unconcerned and oblivious that everyone was having a front row seat in watching her relieve herself. But nothing ever seemed to embarrass little Laurie, for she had very little self-consciousness, and if you needed to go, well, why not do it in front of a live audience while you were at it? "What the hell is Laurie doing?" said Avril in astonishment, turning around to look at Sam in horror. "Your sister is not exactly bashful, is she?" she said with a bit of a chuckle in her voice, as Avril didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Honestly, that daughter of hers was the end. Some of her idiosyncratic behaviours were almost amusing, if not exceedingly frustrating, to say the very least. From the moment Laurie was born, she had been different to other kids her age, governed by her own set of rules, which dictated some of the bizarre choices she ultimately made. The rain spitefully continued to pelt down, but Laurie seemed unperturbed by the fact that she was getting soaking wet, almost as if it didn't matter at all. "Why on earth is your sister squatting in the middle of the road like this? Goodness gracious me! Good job this isn't a highway, 'cause she could have been mown down like a cat. I raised her to be discreet, but she doesn't seem to know the meaning of the word." Sam, who was watching his sister behaving so peculiarly and making such a bizarre, rather humiliating show of herself, could not help but burst out into laughter, as, like his mother, he found some of his sister's quirky, rather unorthodox behaviours very strange indeed. Sam knew, of course, that if he needed to relieve himself, he'd find a private tree on the opposite side of the road, and be quick and discreet about it, making absolutely certain that no one saw him going about his business. But his sister was cut out of a different cloth to him, that was for sure. Laurie finally, after thankfully relieving herself, steadily pulled up her pants and straightened out the pretty floral dress that she was wearing. Her clothes were saturated, her hair hanging in messy strands around her face, her skin glistening with water. She looked a sorry, miserable sight indeed, like a half-drowned kitten. She seemed unfazed, that she was getting soaked to the skin, and appeared momentarily distracted, as if forgetting that she was holding up 2 passengers in the car that were patiently waiting for her to return. It was as if she had all but forgotten that they were even there, and was caught up in her own bubble, as if she had all the time in the world to do what she wanted to do. For a moment she stood up and looked at some trees fringing the far side of the road, and her face suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree, and she began to skip up and down like an ebullient puppy dog, and wave excitedly. "What is all that about, Sam?" asked Avril, looking directly at her son, as if Sam might have the answer to his sister's idiosyncratic performance. "Who on earth is Laurie waving at? As far as I can see, no one is out there. But look at her. She's completely animated. She doesn't seem to realize that she's soaked to the skin." "Maybe she's waving at a wild animal. She loves wild animals," said Sam with a cheeky grin on his face. "Honestly, that sister of yours can be such a dreadful liability," said Avril, shaking her head furiously. "Every time we go on a road trip, it's the same old story." Avril slammed her hand on the horn, and it made a loud noise. She wanted to get her daughter's attention, because Laurie was dawdling so much. "What on earth is she doing now?" said Avril, groaning in despair, as she watched her little daughter bending over a puddle of water, as if examining something intently. "Honestly, what is she doing now? I told her to relieve herself, not hold us up like this, while she examines every single puddle in the road. What is she so curious about? That's what I want to know." "Maybe she's found a frog," Sam suggested. "Laurie loves frogs. Remember the one she brought into the house last spring? It hopped around the place, and Laurie was in her element." Avril rolled her eyes. She remembered the incident all too well, and didn't exactly want to be reminded of it. She recalled how absolutely elated Laurie had been with the hopping frog, which finally they'd taken to live in the goldfish pond at the back of the yard, and Laurie would often watch it sunning itself on the water lilies. She had given the frog a name, and told everyone who would listen that Bertie the frog had got very fat, as he ate so many flies. "I think he likes the goldfish pond," Laurie had told her mother proudly. "I'm sorry, Sam, but that is not going to happen. Not under this car roof, it's not. We're not having any frogs hopping around in here," said Avril resolutely, blasting the horn again, as her patience was wearing very thin. She was beginning to feel exceedingly annoyed with Laurie, who was certainly taking her time to get back to the car, almost as if holding up her mother in the pouring rain was the very least of her childlike concerns. Avril instinctively knew that by the time Laurie got back into the car, she'd be like a fish swimming around in a goldfish bowl. Jellicoe began to bark furiously, wagging his long blonde tail with a thumping ebullience, as if Laurie's exhibition of herself had made him very, very excited. If Jellicoe had his way, he'd be splashing around in those puddles, having the time of his life, kicking up water and mud everywhere, without a single worry in the world. Jellicoe never cared about the rain, and back in Toronto he was always fixated over the garden hose, and loved getting completely soaked by the water. Finally Laurie waddled back to the car, with a bashful grin on her face, clutching something disgustingly muddy to her chest. Avril once again groaned. Her daughter loved picking up stuff from odd places, and bringing these unmentionable things into her home. Sometimes she'd brought in insects, which she would put in a glass jar with holes in the top. One time she'd brought home a baby's dirty booty, and another time she'd found a dog's mangled-looking tennis ball that she'd brought home to gift Jellicoe with. What the hell was she bringing into the car this time, she wondered. "It better not be a dead animal that she's bringing in here," thought Avril, shuddering with disgust. She could imagine her daughter insisting that the deceased piece of roadkill that she had retrieved on the road, that she suddenly felt desperately sorry for, at the very least deserved a decent burial, and then Avril would have to conduct a funeral ceremony in the yard, like they had done once before, when Laurie had found a dead cat, once lying on their back step. Laurie had cried so many tears, as if she'd personally known the cat. They had put it in a shoebox and covered the gravesite with half the flowers in the yard. Avril's favourite flower bed had been decimated by her daughter's enthusiasm to give this deceased cat a send-off that would never be forgotten. Laurie climbed into the back seat, covering Avril's pristine leather seats with her sopping clothes, so that trickles of rainwater ran down the seats onto the carpet below. "All done, Mummy," she said proudly. "I can see you've finished your business, love," said Avril sarcastically. "You gave us quite a good show, did you not?" "Oh, honestly, next time, Laurie, don't relieve yourself in the middle of the road in front of our car like that. Find somewhere a little bit more private, will you? It's very unattractive watching someone answering a call of nature. You're lucky we're in the middle of nowhere. You should never relieve yourself in the middle of the road in the first place. It's not safe. Imagine if a car were to mow you down." "But I couldn't go anywhere else," said Laurie in defence. "I had to go there and then. I was walking over to a tree on the other side of the road, but then—" "I don't want to know. Please, Laurie, spare me the details, will you? There are some things I would rather not be informed about." "Look what I found, Mummy," she said, leaning forward to the front seat and showing off a sopping wet rag doll, drenched to the skin in mud. "Look, it's a doll I found. I rescued it from the puddle out there. I saved her from drowning." "That's absolutely disgusting, love," said Avril, staring at her daughter incredulously, with an expression of dismayed revulsion on her face. At least it wasn't a dead animal that Laurie had brought into the car, but by the looks of things it was a close second for sure. "Put it back where you found it, love. Get it out of here at once. It's absolutely revolting, and it smells nasty. Very nasty indeed." "No, I will not," said Laurie, standing up for herself quite adamantly. She could be quite obstinate when she wanted to be. "Finders keepers. She's my doll from now on. Don't worry, Mummy, I'll clean her up when we get to the cabin. She's a little dirty, that's all. She needs a wash." "Yuck," said Sam in disgust. "It's disgusting. I'm sorry, but I've never liked your dolls. But this is the ugliest and worst doll you've ever had." Laurie put her fingers to her lips. "Shh! She might hear what you're saying. She could be hurt by your words. She can't help it if she's dirty, can she?" Sam let out a scoff. "Yeah, right. Your doll can talk. And she's got feelings, hasn't she?" "She can hear every single word you say," said Laurie. "She doesn't like you, Sam. She's just told me that I have a horrible, horrible brother who likes making fun of her. She's very hurt by you." "Well, I don't like her either," said Sam, snorting. "Dolls are stupid. They're for girls." "Throw it out, love," said Avril. "We don't want that dirty thing in here. Please cast it out of the car, will you? It stinks to high heaven. How about we go to Canmore in the morning, and I buy you a brand new doll? Won't that be nice? A much prettier doll than that is. Have we got a deal?" Avril was absolutely certain her daughter would rejoice at the very idea of acquiring a brand new doll, and would promptly throw out the revolting specimen that she had in her hand back into the rain and onto the road where it clearly belonged. But Avril had underestimated her daughter's extraordinary attachment to the doll that she found, and so it was clear that there was no wiggle room for any negotiations with a very stubborn 6-year-old. "I don't want another doll, Mum. This doll is very, very special, so I only want her. She's the best doll in the whole world. She needs a new mummy, because she doesn't have her old mummy anymore, and I'm going to watch over her. I'm going to keep her," said Laurie insistently. "When she's cleaned up, Mummy, she'll be very pretty, I promise. I'm going to call her Annabelle, 'cause Annabelle's her name, and all the prettiest dolls in the whole world are called Annabelle." "Is that right?" said Avril. She sighed in exasperated resignation as she abruptly started up the engine. She reached over the seat to hand a large towel to her daughter that she always kept in the front when she travelled. "Laurie, dry yourself with this towel," she demanded. "I don't want you catching your death of cold. Look at you, you're shivering." Laurie gratefully took the towel. She began to dry her soaking wet hair and her clothes, along with wiping down the seats. She had certainly brought a lot of water into the car. Avril decided that for the time being she would say no more about the matter concerning the doll, but at the earliest convenience she would throw it away when Laurie wasn't looking, and feign surprise when the doll mysteriously went missing. What on earth was that doll doing, lying on a lonely, deserted country road in the middle of nowhere, she wondered. Who had the doll actually belonged to? "Oh, love, I forgot to ask you, who was that you were waving at in the woods over there? You were jumping up and down in great excitement, as if you saw someone you knew. I didn't see anybody there. Neither did your brother, did you, Sam?" "Because there was no one there," said Sam. "Laurie was waving at her invisible friend as usual. Isn't that right, Laurie?" "I don't have an invisible friend, silly," said Laurie, sticking out her tongue at her brother again. "I was waving at the bear man." "Bear man?" said Avril, sounding confounded. "You saw a bear, did you, love? Is that what you're saying?" "I didn't see a bear," said Laurie. "I told you I didn't see a bear. I know what a bear looks like, Mummy. I'm not stupid. I saw the bear man," she said insistently. "There is no bear man," said Sam. "You're lying, Laurie. You didn't see anything. You're making it all up." "I'm not a liar, and I'm not making it up, Sam. It was a bear man," said Laurie defiantly. "I bet you he wouldn't like you. Annabel here doesn't like you, and the bear man doesn't either. He only waved at me. You never even saw him." "Where exactly did you say we were going, Mum?" asked Sam, quick to change the subject, and ignoring his sister's cynical retort. Sam knew that Laurie indulged in a highly overactive imagination. She loved to play with her dolls for hours on end, and invite invisible guests to her imaginary tea parties. He was sure if there had been anything loitering around in the woods, his beady eyes would not have missed it for a beat. So his sister was of course making it all up, probably just to gain some attention. Avril must have been thinking the very same thing, for she didn't interrogate her daughter any more about the bear man she claimed to have seen. Her Hyundai continued to roll across the bumpy, very temperamental road at a relaxed pace, for she knew in these treacherous conditions you needed to drive with due caution, as the last thing that Avril wanted was to get her wheels wedged in the mud somewhere. "How many times do I have to tell you, Sam, where we're going? Have you got cauliflower in your ears or something?" she said sarcastically. What was it about her kids that made her need to repeat herself half a dozen times, as if they never listened to the first time when she answered a question? "I've forgotten where we're going, that's all," said Sam. "Well, Sam, as I've told you many times, we're going to stay at the Birchwoods cabin. You remember Mr. and Mrs. Birchwood, don't you?" "Oh, you mean the funny old lady with the pink hair that stands up like a hedgehog? The one who wears so much pink rouge all over her cheeks. She looks like a clown, and her husband's funny too. He also looks weird." "She's not a funny old lady, Sam. Mind how you talk about people, will you? That's not a nice thing to say about Mrs. Birchwood. And her hair does stand on end because it's a spiky hairstyle, which is very trendy and fashionable at the moment, I'll have you know. So it actually suits her. So don't be so condemning, will you?" "But I'm telling you the truth," Sam insisted. "She's a funny old lady, Mummy. She wears so much pink. I've never ever seen her wear any other colour." "Well, Mrs. Birchwood loves pink, doesn't she? Nothing wrong with that at all. Just like your sister loves pink. It's a very feminine colour." "Yeah, and I love blue, but I don't wear it all the time, do I, Mum? Nor do I dye my hair blue." "Well, it's a good job you don't dye your hair blue, love. You'd be kicked out of school very fast. I can't imagine how Mrs. Carter-Barry would react if you were sent to her offices with blue hair. I wouldn't hear the end of it from the woman. I would ultimately be blamed, of course, as Mrs. Carter-Barry believes that all children are an extension of their parents. So if you were to dye your hair blue, Sam, it will all be my fault, which would make me a very bad mother. Well, then maybe I should dye my hair blue then. It would be funny to see how Mrs. Carter-Barry would react. She'd probably have kittens, wouldn't she, Mum? She'd send me straight back home, and I'd never have to go to school ever again. That would be so, so cool. You cheeky thing. What a naughty thing for you to say, Sam, said Avril with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. Don't get any funny ideas into your head, young man. I certainly don't need Mrs. Carter-Barry breathing down my neck like the proverbial dragon. And if you went to school with blue hair, I'd never hear the end of it from that nasty woman. No matter what you say, Mum, Mrs. Birchwood is a funny old lady. She really is super weird. She thinks she's Cinderella, but she's too old for all that. Well, if you want to call Mrs. Birchwood a funny old lady, you make sure, Sam, you don't say it when she's around. Is that understood? I'm not stupid, Mum, said Sam. Nor am I rude. Of course I wouldn't say that to her face. That would be a horrible thing to do. I'm not like that. Good, I'm glad to hear it. The Birchwoods are exceedingly good friends of your grandparents. They're the same age, you see. My mother has known the Birchwoods for many years. She went to school with Mrs. Birchwood, you know. The Birchwoods are getting on in age, as are my own parents, so they don't use the cabin very much these days, so they often rent the place out to strangers. And, well, they've been terribly kind. They've allowed me to use their cabin for 6 weeks. Isn't that nice of them? I suppose so, said Sam. If they're not using it, I suppose it is a nice thing to do. Well, there you go, then. You see, kids, the lady who looks after the cabin, while the Birchwoods are not present, well, her name is Hilda. She cleans the place up for them, and lives in the nearby town of Camville. She's very kindly offered to look after the both of you, while I get down to some much-needed hard work. She'll be staying in the cabin with us, cleaning the cabin, cooking, looking after you, showing you all a good time. And I understand she's in her early 20s, and is particularly good with children, so I'm sure you're going to have a great deal of fun with her. And as for Jellicoe over here, well, he's going to have the time of his life running around this vast space, don't you think, instead of our very small backyard in Toronto. He's going to think that heaven has landed, I suspect. But why do we have to come here in the first place? You normally work from home, don't you, Mum? Sam was quick to point out. You work in the office at home, and Daddy goes to the office in the city. So why are you going to work in the Birchwoods cabin, out here in the middle of nowhere? Yes, you make a very good point, love. And it is true. I do normally work from the office at home, but I'm suffering from what is known as writer's block. So I thought a change of scene would do me good. It was your grandmother's idea, if you must know, for us to come here. Your dad's not remotely happy, of course, about being abandoned for 6 weeks, but he understands why we're going away. Are you sick, Mummy? Asked little Laurie. Her face was now dappled with a grave concern. What is writer's block, Mummy? Is it a very bad illness? Myrtle at school says her mummy is very, very sick all the time. She says her mummy vomits and gets very weak and has to stay in bed all day long. Sometimes she can't even get up, and she doesn't eat very much because she feels so very sick. I know all about Myrtle's mother, love. She's sick all the time because she's suffering from Lyme's disease, but she's been diagnosed, so she's getting better. And she's going to be just fine. She got the illness from a nasty tick bite. Writer's block is not like that. It's not a physical illness, so to speak. It just means I'm struggling to put words onto paper. So no, I'm not sick, Laurie. So you didn't get bitten by a tick, did you, Mummy? No, I did not. I'd have to do a lot of walking to get a tick caught on me somehow. I haven't walked for a long time, but that is going to change with Jellicoe and the woods that we're going to explore. So I'm quite sure we're going to have a lot of outdoor activity, and that's going to definitely inspire me. If you must know, my publisher is on my back, nagging me to get my book written, but I've hit a stumbling block in the road. What that means is I haven't got a clue what to write about. The other day I stared at a blank computer screen for ages and ages, and the only words I put down on that computer were, "I can't do this. I can't do this." I wrote that over 2,000 times, because that's how frustrated I was. In the heat of the moment, I do what I always do when I need encouragement and sound advice. I phoned your grandmother, and I will admit I was in quite the state. And your grandmother, bless her heart, told me I needed some inspiration, and I wasn't going to get any of that stuck in the office back at home, staring out onto the street.
What exactly does inspiration mean, Mummy?
Asked Laurie. It's a little like if I ask you to paint a picture for me, Laurie, and you don't know what to paint. Your mind is empty. You haven't got any ideas. Sometimes you need something or someone to give you an idea of what it is that you can paint. And when you have an idea in your head, you paint easily, don't you? Do you understand what I'm trying to say, love?
Yes, I think I do, said Laurie. Sometimes it's true because I don't know what to draw or what to paint, and then my teacher says to me, "What did you do at home this week? Think about it." And I tell her I played ball with Jellicoe, and she says, "Well, that's a good idea then. Why don't you paint Jellicoe running after the ball you threw?" And then I know exactly what to paint.
There you go, love. I couldn't have put it better myself. That's what inspiration means. In other words, your teacher inspired you to paint Jellicoe, didn't she, when you didn't know what to paint? Anyway, going back to my phone call with your grandmother, very suddenly she reminded me that the Birchwoods had a cabin, and she thought that this would be the quintessential perfect place for me to find some inspiration, get some good ideas for the story I'm trying to write. Your grandmother took the initiative to ask Mrs. Birchwood on my behalf if I could possibly use the cabin for 6 weeks or so. She told Mrs. Birchwood about my unfortunate case of writer's block, and Mrs. Birchwood was very sympathetic. She said no one was staying in the cabin at the moment, and we were more than welcome to use it, all 3 of us. Of course, I wanted to pay her in kind for her great generosity, like any other paying guest would, but she refused to accept any money from me. She's not charging us a penny, as long as I leave a mention of her and her husband once it's finished in the foreword of the book I'm writing. The Birchwoods say we can stay at the cabin as long as we like, without any charge. But of course I do have to pay for the services of their cleaner, come au pair, that we will be hiring. The young lady called Hilda McFeece, I believe the name is.
"But why will the cabin get rid of your writer's block?" asked Sam. "How can it do that for you? I don't understand exactly."
It's not that complicated, Sam, to understand. It's going back to the inspiration I was talking about with your sister. You see, when you're a writer, the environment you are in can easily affect your mood. I cannot say for sure that the cabin will get rid of my writer's block per se. I mean, there are no guarantees about anything in life. Suffice to say, your grandmother emphatically believes that if I'm swaddled by the pretty views of the natural world and this part of Alberta, which is close to the town of Canmore, well, it might inspire my creative juices. And let's not kid. I know you cannot see it at the moment, but this part of the world is absolutely idyllic. Once the rain finally stops and the sun comes out, you'll get the full measure of how stunning your new environment is, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It's not unheard of, Sam, you know, for writers to go off on writing retreats to idyllic, very magnificent parts of the world, so that they are gainfully inspired to write. And many artists, poets, and writers alike have come here to Alberta, to the Rocky Mountains, to places like Lake Louise, to do just that. It's taken us 5 days of travel to get here, with many stops along the way, and you've been very good passengers. So I'm hoping this long journey would have been worth our while, but only time will tell about that. The 4-roomed office back at home, with its rather bland walls, I'm afraid doesn't do very much for me. And there are all the distractions to boot we get at home, from the postman, Mr. Ross, who never stops yabbering away about his wife's new hair salon. I mean, I've been to that hair salon so many times. So, what else can I say to the man? That I'm delighted that she's an owner of a hair salon. But he can't stop talking about the woman. Then there's our next-door neighbour, Mrs. Sanders, always knocking on our door every 2 seconds to see if we've seen her cat. Your father believes that Mrs. Sanders is a lonely old woman, looking for the perfect excuse to have a cup of tea with me. And while I like her very much, when I invite her in for tea, she never leaves. She talks and talks. That woman could talk the tail off a donkey, let me tell you. Then the time has gone by so fast that I have to pick you kids up from school and kindergarten. The day has been swallowed alive before it's even started. So I haven't even accomplished a thing. Let's just say the daily distractions that affect me are a writer's worst enemy, and people who don't write never understand the importance of a life without interruptions. You need to surround yourself as a writer with a sanctuary of peace and quiet. And with Mrs. Sanders around, I don't stand a fighting chance to get anything accomplished at this rate.
Mrs. Sanders is always losing her cat, Mummy, said Laurie earnestly. Her cat Bo Peep is so very naughty. Once she climbed up to the top of the tree and they couldn't get her down. Mrs. Saunders was so upset. She was crying. She had to call the fire brigade. The big man with the huge muscles, he got to the top of the tree on his ladder. He brought down Bo Peep. And the little Bo Peep was so scared. She was shaking all over. I felt so sorry for her, Mum. Mrs. Sanders really liked the handsome fireman, 'cause she kept giggling, and then she said Bo Peep was a very naughty cat.
Oh, I do remember that very well, laughed Avril. When the fireman brought down Bo Peep, I think Mrs. Saunders was more interested in him than she was in the state of little Bo Peep. She was really in awe of his massive muscles. Needless to say, she went to the fire station the very next day with a huge homemade chocolate cake for the man. So I think she had other ideas that day than just Bo Peep, shall we say.
You think coming here will make you write better, Mummy?
Asked Laurie, clutching her doll lovingly, as if it was her new best friend. Well, I sincerely hope so, dear. That's why we've come out here. But judging by this long-suffering car journey, and the fact that I don't know where the hell I am, I will say this. It doesn't exactly make for a promising start, does it? It doesn't help that this damn GPS of mine has gone completely haywire. I'm not getting a signal from my cell phone, which is most unfortunate. I've got a funny feeling I didn't charge it properly at the bed and breakfast we went to last night. Or if I had, that connection must have been very bad. I could have sworn it was charged. But if it had been, it wouldn't have run out of battery already. I'm looking for a little turning off one of these tributary roads called Ingram's Close. If you see it, give me a shout, will you? My vision is so obscured with this downfall, blasting down like this, and it doesn't help that my glasses keep misting up like steam on a bathroom window. God knows why that keeps happening, but it's exceedingly annoying.
But we passed the sign for Ingram's Close a while back, said Sam. I saw it. It was the turning off the road before, where Laurie relieved herself. Don't you remember?
Dearie me, I never noticed any turning. Are you saying you saw the turning for Ingram's Close? Said Avril, looking annoyed, almost as if Sam was to blame for not mentioning the turn-off earlier, when he hadn't even known his mother was looking for it in the first place. Avril had forgotten that when you had 3 pairs of eyes in the car with you, helping you to seek out a destination, life could be a lot easier.
But you wouldn't have seen it, Mum. Don't blame yourself for that. The sign was very old and deteriorated, and the road was very small. It looked more like a path. I almost missed it myself, but then I realized it was there."
"Well done, Sam, to you, for being so shrewdly observant," said Avril, giving her son a warm, encouraging smile. Jellicoe barked approvingly, as if he also thought Sam needed to be commended for being so astute. Before long Avril had turned around, and they were driving past where they had initially come, and right through the large puddle of water where little Laurie had found the rag doll. And then, just as Sam had described, an obscure sign with an arrow pointing to the left could be clearly seen, and it read Ingram's Close. "I can't believe I missed that turning," said Avril, sighing with relief, as she swiveled the steering wheel around and made the turn down the long windy road that initially looked more like a footpath than a road, but finally it widened. When Avril reached the end of the road, which was like a faint squiggle on a map that you could barely notice, she took an abrupt turn to the right, and there she could see the sign for Birchwood Cabin, which was so clearly marked she'd never have missed it. She turned around to smile warmly at her children. "I do believe our luck is finally changing. I think we've hit pay dirt. And look, the rain has stopped," she said, her face suddenly brightening. "Isn't it so typical?" she said. "The rain only stops when we reach our required destination." It was true, the rain had suddenly vanished. The grey sky receded. A blue sky stepped out like a woman wearing a bright blue dress, carrying a rainbow upon her shoulders. It was all suddenly so pretty, and for a moment it seemed like a dimmer switch had suddenly turned right up as the sun came out. "We just need to travel down this road, and I suspect it will lead us straight to the cabin we're looking for. Are you excited to come here, kids? I mean, you'll be missing nursery, won't you, Laurie? And you're going to have 6 weeks off school, aren't you, Sam? And every kid likes getting time off school, don't they? I know when I was a girl, I was delighted when I got 8 weeks off school. Best time of my life it was. You'll have to do some homeschooling, of course, Sam, but Hilda will help you out with that. I understand that Hilda is right at the cabin waiting for us now, even as I speak. I'm looking extremely forward to meeting her, and I'm quite sure you kids are going to like her." Laurie and Sam looked at each other. They didn't respond enthusiastically to their mother's comments. They were not sure about how they felt about coming to this mysterious part of the world, as prepossessing as it may be, for the surroundings were so unfamiliar to them and a little daunting, as a strange place can be like that for ones as young as them. But Avril was not concerned about this. She knew all too well that her children had extraordinary resilience, like most children do, and after 6 weeks spent here, she was most sure they probably wouldn't even want to return home. But she knew her husband Francis, known to his friends as Franco, was not remotely impressed that they would be gone for so long. Avril quickly shut her eyes. Her eyelashes flickered as she tried to abruptly push away the memory of her husband's anguish when she told him that they were leaving Toronto for 6 weeks. He had been so upset by that revelation, and the way he'd watched them turn out of the driveway that morning, 5 days prior, well, he'd looked like an abandoned puppy that had been left behind to fend for himself. Avril knew, of course, that Franco hated being on his own. He was very much a family man, who enjoyed spending time with his wife and children, and she didn't know how he'd cope without her. She rather suspected for the next 6 weeks or so he'd be living on tins of tuna, toast and baked beans, as Franco didn't have a clue how to cook for himself, and she knew he'd feel desperately lonely without the family around. Still, she thought, he could get some of his odd jobs he'd put on the back burner for so long done, including painting the rusty old letterbox. Avril knew, of course, that she'd miss her husband Franco desperately, as much as he'd likely miss her. But sometimes a break from your spouse made you appreciate him or her all the more. And what was wrong with that? Of course she felt intrinsically guilty, leaving Franco behind, but she knew that this book wasn't going to write itself by magic, and remaining in Toronto with its daily distractions sucking the life out of her imagination would mean that her writing would become all but redundant. She had definitely needed this escape. She had to leave the rat race of Toronto behind her, the daily hustle and bustle of life, and seek out a quieter, more serene sanctuary for the rebirth of a dying imagination. But convincing her husband Franco of this had certainly not been easy. "Must you go, love? I don't understand why you need to do this. You've never up and left our home before, for the purposes of writing. So why now all of a sudden?"
I don't expect you to understand, Franco. But you're not a writer, are you? Nobody understands what writers go through every day when they try to find ideas for their novels. I'm struggling to get words onto my computer, and you have no idea what I mean when I talk about struggling. I've been staring at a space in front of my computer screen for ages, not knowing what the hell to write, and it can't go on like this. I have deadlines to worry about.
But you're normally so good at writing. Everything flows with you freely like a spring of water. What's the problem now? Why is this happening to you?
I don't know, Franco. I don't have any ideas. And it doesn't help that Cheryl Burberry is on my back every 2 minutes, asking me how the book is coming along. That's making the pressure all the more worse for me. I met up with her last week at the coffee shop on 4th Street. You know, the one with the beer barrels of flowers on the outside, and all the stunning hanging baskets.
"Yes, I know the one," said Franco. "They make a very good Mississippi mud pie, they do."
Well, you should have seen her, Franco. She was so eager to find out what my next thriller was about. She was like a hawk standing over a meaty carcass. She wanted to get to the nuts and bolts of my story. I've been lying to her, Frank, lying to my own publisher. I haven't got the heart to tell her that at the moment I'm like a cow that you can't milk, because nothing is coming out. There is no milk, no cream, no butter. How can I tell her that I'm dried out and parched like a barren old desert without a drop of water around? I told her, of course, that I'd be sending her a synopsis of my book in due course. I mean, what else could I say? I had to make it up as I went along. But then I'm good at that because I normally have a good imagination. So I was good at duping her and putting her off, but I can only do that for so long. I've received advance payments for this book from her, and I have to complete it soon. I can't tell her that I just can't think of a damn thing to write. It's my imagination. It's completely shut down, Franco. Nothing is flowing. Do you know what that feels like for a writer? It's absolutely devastating.
This is not like you, love. Not the Avril I know. You're normally inspired by wild ideas, and you can't stop writing. Sometimes I can't even keep up with your wildly inventive mind.
I know it's not like me, and this is incongruous for me, but I think I might be suffering from burnout. My mother thinks I need some inspiration to jog up the enthusiasm inside of me. She got in touch with the Birchwoods. You know the Birchwoods, the woman with the pink hair. Well, they say I can use their cabin in Alberta for 6 weeks or so, in the hope that I'll get my inspiration back. Many writers, Franco, they need a change of scene very often. Some writers regularly do it, and I believe it really helps them, you know, with their writing. And so I'm going to give it a bash. I've never done something like this before, but why not try something different? I'll take the kids and Jellicoe with me. We'll be gone for 6 weeks. I hope you don't mind us abandoning you like this, Franco, but I need to do this. I need to give myself a chance to get back on track again, or I'll be left behind. And I really don't want to have to confess to my publisher that I was lying and deceiving her all along. And if I stay here, that's what's going to happen, and that's going to be incredibly humiliating for me.
You're going for 6 weeks, love. That's a long time to be away. I mean, I'll come home every night to a dead house without any life in it. It's going to be a hell of a miserable for me.
I'll call you regularly, love. I really will keep in touch, but I've got to get this book written. You need to understand how important this is for me.
Avril had not felt good about herself when she'd seen her husband's sorry face fall. as if he was masking a silent scream within him that was surreptitiously begging her to stay with him. But Avril had followed her gut instincts, even though she hated upsetting her husband like this. She knew remaining at home in Toronto and staring at those four walls of her study, while being constantly bombarded and interrupted by an annoying next-door neighbour, Mrs. Sanders, who always appeared to be looking for little Bo Peep, her wayward cat, was not going to help her any time soon get her book written. Avril cast every thought of her husband away, knowing full well that dwelling on the fact she was leaving him behind for the next 6 weeks or so would make sleep for her not come easily at night, for she would ultimately be rudely plagued with a guilty conscience, and that would be another roadblock that would stifle her ability to write, and she couldn't have that happen. Franco would be fine on his own, she assured herself. Besides, it will do him good to be on his own, and to realize what a wonderful family he has. For after all, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Avril began to concentrate on the road ahead of her. The trip to this intriguing part of the world had been exhausting, to say the very least, especially with 2 rambunctious, wilful kids sitting in the back of her car that had long since tired out of playing I Spy, and were becoming increasingly frustrated by being stuck on the road for the last 5 days or so, along with her beloved, devoted dog Jellicoe, who also had not fully appreciated being trussed up in a car for so long. Avril needed her writing companion, of which Jellicoe was the very best, for he would adoringly lie at her feet when she wrote her stories at the computer, and was the companion she could not do without. She was sure coming here may be an opportunity to inspire her creativity. She could take long walks in the woods with Jellicoe at her side, and in the evening happily watch the sunset over the horizon. And while the day seeped into night, eventually a burgeoning dark sky would invite the twinkling stars and pearly moon to coronate the night sky with their resplendence. And Avril loved staring up at the Milky Way and watching the stars that she knew were hundreds of millions of light years away from planet Earth. Hopefully something inside Avril would click into place, so that an idea for her story would be easily sparked, as out here in the Alberta wilderness she'd have plenty of time to herself, especially as she had Hilda at hand, who would be around to relieve her of the responsibility of taking charge over her children. Avril's white SUV somewhat apprehensively rolled down the driveway at an even pace, reflecting the tightening in her chest, for she was suddenly clouded with tenebrific feelings of doubt, wondering if having come here was a grievous mistake after all. But it was too late for her to change her mind now, for they were a long way away from Toronto. The rugged driveway was rather jiggly. So many stones on the rugged path were pinging against the underbelly of her car, but she ignored them. Finally, a little charming 2-story Hansel and Gretel wooden cabin, made of a deep honey-coloured wood, came into sight, that was hugged magnanimously on all sides by a very stylishly designed wraparound porch. On the top floor there were balconies that overlooked the mountains from a great height, and Avril was sure that they offered the most sensational views for miles around of the Alberta countryside. The mountain ranges were spectacular. They were exquisite in every sense of the word, grabbing your undivided attention, for they were a sight that you could not ignore. The mountain peaks, somewhat haphazardly, but very purposefully, bustrated their way up into the sky. Like majestic signatures, they were covered in fine snow that glistened and twinkled in the afternoon sun, like white gloss. The lower part of the mountains were covered with a thick leafy green foliage from all the trees. One of the mountains dipped into an undulating hilly valley that was like an extensive rockery, richly peppered with a kaleidoscope of flowers in every imaginable colour known to man. It was absolutely breathtaking, and even Laurie's words were, "Mummy, the cabin is ever so pretty, and the views are really nice. I think I'm going to like staying here after all." "It is lovely, isn't it, dear?" said Avril, suddenly feeling revitalised and refreshed, almost as if the weight of the entire world had suddenly been lifted off her shoulders, and she felt infinitely lighter. Maybe coming here hadn't been such a bad idea after all. She was thinking over all this and proceeding to park her vehicle in the carport next to the cabin, when very suddenly the cabin door boldly swung open, and a young woman came dashing down the steps very eagerly of the wraparound porch. She was wearing 2 blonde braids on either side of her face, along with a big smile. She came sashaying towards their car, as if she was meeting up with a long-lost relative that she hadn't seen in a decade. Her rambunctious enthusiasm could have easily rivaled or outperformed an overexcited Jack Russell Terrier. The first thought in Averil's mind was she couldn't remember a time in her life when anyone had looked this pleased to see her. This must be Hilda McFree, she thought to herself, the young lady that had come to her so highly recommended by the Birchwoods, who had great faith in the young lady's integrity, and insisted that she kept their cabin in immaculate condition, and oversaw the needs of all their guests that had stayed at the cabin over the years. Hilda McFree appeared out of breath by the time that she reached the car, which wasn't remotely surprising, for she had charged towards them like a rhino on steroids, although she was far too elegant and delicate of stature to be described as such. The young woman's white face was flushed bright pink, but she seemed so enthusiastic to see Avril. That appeared to have set Jellicoe off, like a spark of fire being thrust over dry wood and igniting it. He was barking excitedly, beating his big tail against the seat, as if he could barely contain his ebullience, for the young woman's tangible excitement was extremely infectious for him. It would seem even Sam and little Laurie were not immune to this warm reception. Jellicoe was an impressionable dog, of course, who could pick up people's moods very easily, and he could discern all kinds of scents not even discernible to a human being, but the scent of optimism had sent him into a wild frenzy. Avril climbed out of her car, looking somewhat bemused to see this young face staring up at her with wide glossy eyes, as if she was a Queen of Sheba or someone else of notable importance that had suddenly arrived on the scene, and it looked as if Hilda was about to roll out a red carpet for her. "You must be Hilda McFree. It's very good to meet you," said Avril, feeling somewhat self-conscious by the rather baffling, enthralled, overawed look in Hilda's face that was slightly bewildering to say the very least. "It's very kind of you to meet us like this. Jellicoe, please get down. Please stop, Jellicoe. Behave yourself, will you?" She watched Jellicoe embarrassingly leapfrogging towards the young lady and almost knocking her over to her feet in his unbridled enthusiasm to greet this very excitable stranger that probably reminded him of some of his furry companions at the doggy park. "I'm sorry about my dog," Avril apologized profusely. "I'm afraid he's been cooped up in the car for so long, so I guess he's ecstatic to finally be able to run free around here. I guess he can do lots of exploring without being limited to our small backyard back in Toronto, and believe me, when I say small, it's very small. I think he picked up your rather upbeat energy, which I guess he's not used to seeing in human beings. At the doggy park, he sees that kind of energy all the time, but not among human beings. So you've definitely made a friend out of him." "Well, I'm glad to hear that, but don't apologize for your dog. He's so lovely," said the young lady, getting down onto her haunches and enveloping Jellicoe into a big, open, friendly hug. She stroked his golden fur gently, while she rubbed her face against him, all the while her jubilant smile refused to leave her face. Jellicoe looked as if he'd died and gone to heaven, for he loved being fussed over like this. "I really love dogs," said Hilda McFree, "and I'm afraid I've got a big weakness for golden Labradors. They're my favourite of dog breeds, I'm afraid." "Well, I'm glad to hear that, because you're going to have to put up with the likes of him and his spirited behaviour for the next 6 weeks or so. He is normally a well-behaved dog, not usually this outrageously misbehaved, but he does have his moments." "I think I'm going to get on fine with Jellicoe here," said Hilda, rising to her feet. She shook Avril's hand. "I'm Hilda McFree," she said, "and I'm so delighted to finally meet you. The Birchwoods have told me all about you, and I just want to say you are so welcome to Alberta, and to the Birchwoods cabin, of course. I hope you will be very, very happy here, The cabin is very well presented, I think you'll find. You'll love this part of the world, I'm most sure. If you're looking for stunning views, fabulous adventurous walks, beautiful sunsets and rises, along with the best sleep you've ever had in your life, you've come to the right place. Sorry, I don't mean to sound like an advertisement for this part of the world, and I'm not paid to go on about Alberta like this, in case you're wondering. But for me it's a very special place, you see. I was raised here by my grandparents and my parents. We lived together as an extended family in the town of Canmore, and that's where I still live today. I personally couldn't imagine living anywhere else in the entire world. I guess, at heart, I'm a small-town girl. I've spent time in Toronto, of course, with the Birchwoods. But big cities, well, I don't like them all that much. I feel a little lost and stranded in a big city. But out here I belong as much as the trees and the indigenous wildlife does.
Well, I understand what you mean by that, dear. Toronto. I've lived there all my life, you know. And still, even then, there are moments when I feel as if the hustle and bustle of life gets all too much for me. I imagine for someone such as yourself, who's used to a very quiet, serene life, well, Toronto must be overwhelming for you.
You're not kidding about that, Hilda agreed.
Well, it's very nice, as I was saying, to meet you, Hilda. And I'm going to appreciate you living under our roof for the next few weeks and taking charge over my children, because I need plenty of time to get down to writing. You have no idea how extremely grateful I am for someone such as yourself to be here to cook, clean, and take care of my children. It'll be a load off my mind and free up so much time for me. And I'm afraid, as far as time is concerned, it's been of scarce supply for me in Toronto, which is why I'm here.
Well, I'm delighted to help in any way I can, said Hilda. That's what I'm here for, Mrs. Frieseman, to take the load off your shoulders. I'm very good at cleaning and cooking, and for your information, I absolutely adore children.
Well, that's a relief to hear, because you're going to have to look after my 2 children for the next 6 weeks, and both of them, I'm warning you, can be handfuls. Sam is pretty easy-going, though, quite a laid-back kind of chap. But Laurie, she's a bit of a daydreamer, and can be obstinately stubborn, especially when she puts her foot down about something, and that happens almost all the time. She's definitely got a mind of her own. Kids, come here, will you? I'd like you to meet Hilda McFreese.
Both of Averil's children stepped forward to politely shake Hilda's hands. They looked a little demure and innocently sweet, but Averil was sure that their quiet demeanour wouldn't last for very long when they became better acquainted with their new companion. "And you must be Sam," said Hilda. "You're 10 years old, is that right?" "That's right," said Sam politely. "I'm 4 years older than my sister Laurie over here. I'm afraid she can be a bit of a baby at times." "And you are?" "My name's Laurie. This is my doll Annabelle," said Laurie shyly, sticking her thumb into her mouth. "Don't listen to Sam, 'cause I'm not a baby. I'm a big girl." "Well, of course you're a big girl. I can see that. You're 6, aren't you? And 6 years olds can be very grown up." "It's nice to meet you, Laurie," said Hilda, looking surprised that Laurie was clutching such a filthy-looking doll that she'd have seriously liked to have grabbed from her at once and thrown into the hot cycle of the washing machine. "I know exactly what you're thinking, Hilda," said Laurie, looking up at Hilda with wide, innocent eyes. "You think my doll is dirty, don't you? She needs a wash, that's all." "Well, I can help you clean her up if you like," said Hilda, giving Laura a big enchanted smile. "She needs a good wash, you're right, and then she'll be so much better, won't she?" Hilda finally turned her attention away from Averil's children. Her bright shining eyes were looking at Averil, as if she thought Averil was some kind of major celebrity, and for a moment Averil felt distinctly uncomfortable. She hated it when people gave you that adoring look. "I can't believe I'm meeting you in the flesh," said Hilda quite suddenly. "I know who you are, but only by your pen name, or shall we say your nom de plume. I never knew authors still had pen names like Charlotte Bronte did. I think her pen name was Carabelle or something like that." she said, her voice lowering to a muted whisper. "I think Charlotte Bronte's was a prettier name, don't you think? But I guess back in those days, women didn't want to admit to being authors, did they? I've read a couple of your books, Mrs. Frieseman. They're incredible, and I really mean that. Mrs. Birchwood says you like to remain, well, what's the word I'm looking for?
Anonymous. And she's right, I do like to remain anonymous," said Avril, completing the young woman's sentence.
Do you mind me asking why, Mrs. Frieseland? Let's just say if I wrote like you, I'd want everyone in the whole wide world to know my name. I'd be happy to have my face splashed across every back cover of my books, and my name in lights wherever I went. I mean, you can really write, Mrs. Frieseman. Very well indeed. I'm not going to kid. Those 2 books you wrote more recently, well, they had me on the edge of my seat. They were absolutely riveting. Why would you want to hide your light under a bushel like that?
I guess I've always been quite self-conscious. I've written under a pseudonym because I don't want people to know who I am. I hate all the fuss and attention that some acclaimed authors receive. I don't want any of that fuss in my life. Some people enjoy being the centre of attention, but that's not for me. I just want to live a normal life, and that's one thing about being a writer. You usually can. That's if you play your cards right.
Well, I guess I can understand that, Mrs. Frieseland. Sorry, I keep calling you Frieserman, and I get your name confused a bit. It is Frieseland, isn't it? Would you like me to show you around the cabin?
The name is Frieseland, but a lot of people get it mixed up like you. I've been called so many things, from Frieserman to everything else. It happens a lot, you know. I'd like to be shown around the cabin very much, said Avril. But let's start by raising all formalities, shall we? You're part of the family now for the next 6 weeks or so. So forget all this Frieseland stuff and call me Avril, will you?
Avril had happily begun to take regular walks in the woodgrove, with her devoted golden Labrador Jellicoe at her side, who seemed to be appreciating their energetic outdoor pursuits as much as Avril was. Being here in the Alberta countryside, surrounded by the spectacular charms, wonders, and marvels of the natural world, had really helped Avril come alive. Avril began to feel that an idea for an adventurous, thrilling story was beginning to brew in her mind. But it would be in the days to follow to see where the story would ultimately lead, as the scaffolding began to form. At least the obstinate feeling of staring at an empty computer screen had long since receded, almost as if her writer's block was now drifting away, like the faint, foggy white smoke from a chimney on a cold winter's evening. Avril had been heartily relieved to see that Hilda had cleaned up the doll that Laurie insisted on keeping, and there had been moments when Avril could have thrown the doll away, but something stopped her from doing just that, not only because her daughter loved the doll so much, but because a little voice in her head told her not to do it. One morning Avril was absent-mindedly looking at the doll that Laurie had found, for it was lying there on the top of the table. She studied it for a moment, and realized that it didn't look half so bad now that it was clean, but it certainly looked extremely old. Hilda was making some tea at the kettle, and began to look at Avril soberly. "Penny for your thoughts, Avril," she said.
"Well, I was just thinking how strange it is that my daughter Laurie stumbled across this doll in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was lying in a puddle in the middle of the road, would you believe? On a sequestered country road at that. All I can say is thank you so much, Hilda, for cleaning it up. Well, the doll looks so much better, almost respectable. It's very old, though. I mean, it looks as if it is quite dated, actually."
"Well, it was no problem to clean it up. It was quite easy to do, actually," said Hilda. "But you're right. The doll is old. It's a relic from the 80s, I suspect. I want to show you something, Avril, if I may. It really made every hair on my head stand up on end."
"You've got me intrigued,"
said Avril, sitting down very suddenly at the breakfast nook to enjoy a cup of coffee that Hilda presented her with. She could see her 2 children, were outside throwing a ball for Jellicoe. Avril watched as Hilda pulled out a piece of newspaper from her purse. "Look at this," she said, handing the newspaper article to Avril. In the newspaper article was a very large photograph of a little girl carrying in her hand a doll that looked almost identical to the one that Laurie had found on the road. The young girl was smiling into the camera and missing her 2 front teeth. Her blonde hair was tied back in 2 pigtails, and she was wearing a pretty white dress covered in little red poppies. She was a pretty little thing with big blue eyes, and Avril got chills when she realized that the girl in the picture could have been a doppelganger for Laurie. The resemblance between the 2 girls was remarkable.
"Good grief," said Avril, unable to hide her surprise. "This doll looks the same as Laurie's, does it not? Even the clothes are identical. And the girl in the picture could so easily be Laurie. They're like doppelgangers, don't you think? You don't suppose the same doll that belonged to this little girl could be the one that Laurie found on the road? But goodness gracious, look at the date on this newspaper. It was printed in 1982. And look at the headline. 6-year-old Haley MacDonald goes missing. Suspect now in police custody."
"You're right. This happened in the 80s, Avril. This little girl, who looks exactly like your daughter, went missing from her home in Canmore, in 1982 to be exact," said Hilda. "I know the case well because I live in Canmore, and my grandparents knew the MacDonalds, so they have an inside scoop on the story, you could say."
"So what exactly happened to this lovely little girl in the picture?" asked Avril, a frown now creasing her forehead. "Was she ever found? They say a suspect was in custody."
"No, sadly she was never found. But foul play was definitely suspected, and Haley's uncle was considered to be the perpetrator of this abduction that happened in broad daylight, would you believe? The uncle was taken into custody and admitted to harming little Haley. He even took the police to her gravesite, where he claimed to have put her body in a shallow grave under a whole bunch of leaves. But when the police investigated the area and looked at the grave, there was no sign of the little girl. Haley's uncle confessed to the crime. He went to prison for life, you know, and believe it or not, he hung himself in a prison cell, and he left a note of apology to his sister, saying he was very sorry for what he'd done to little Haley. In the note he said a demon inside him had made him do this terrible thing to her child, and he begged his sister for her forgiveness, claiming he was a very sick man in his head. I believe when the police took him in for questioning, he told them that there was a monster inside him that made him want to abuse children. He even told the judge that he was a sexual predator that should be kept in prison for life, and he even asked the authorities if they would consider castrating him, but they refused to oblige his request. He really was sorry for what he did."
"Goodness gracious me! What a horrifying story! I can't bear stories about children being abused so needlessly. So how did Haley go missing exactly?" asked Avril. Her curiosity was now standing up on stalks, and if her creative juices had been stifled for a while, this little story was making the dormant imagination inside her rise up from its slumber. Who would have thought a doll her girl had found in the middle of the road would have opened up a whole can of worms like this?
"Well," said Hilda, "if you read the article more clearly, it says that little Haley was out on the street, playing on her bicycle with her doll, who she took with her everywhere she went. The same doll as little Laurie has. The doll is even mentioned in the article. And would you believe she called the doll Annabelle, just like Laurie does?"
"Oh, my word! I don't know what to say to that. How extraordinary! Because Laurie, as you say, calls her doll Annabelle."
Avril's blood ran cold.
"And this missing girl called her doll Annabelle as well. That's so creepy, don't you think? How does my daughter get to find a missing doll from the 1980s, if indeed it is the same doll, in a pool of water in the middle of the road? And then she chooses to call the doll Annabelle. I mean, I just don't believe in coincidences like this, do you?" "No, I can't say I do," said Hilda. "But what else can it be? It's got to be a coincidence, Avril. But I'm convinced it's exactly the same doll. Look at the picture. It's wearing the same dress, is it not? Everything looks the same." "This is creeping me out significantly," said Avril. "I don't understand how this doll can still be in such good condition after all these long years. And why on earth does my daughter get to find it in the middle of the road and then become so obsessed over the doll? I mean, honestly, I've never seen her like this over any other doll she's ever owned. And it's not as if Annabelle is particularly pretty. In fact, she's very dated looking. She calls it exactly the same name as this girl did. It's more than a little weird, don't you think? So tell me, Hilda, did Mrs. MacDonald's, to be exact, did she think her brother was behind the abduction of her daughter?" "Oh, she definitely expected her brother was behind her daughter's abduction. She'd noticed his behaviour towards little Haley for quite some time, if you know what I mean. She knew there was something insidious about it all." "No, I don't know what you mean, Hilda. Why don't you spell it out, dear?" "Well, he was always looking at Haley inappropriately, if you know what I mean. And then he started buying Haley all kinds of gifts and sweets. And Mrs. MacDonald, well, she got extremely worried by his excessive attention towards her daughter, as let's just say her brother showed no interest in his nephew at all, and seemed to ignore him all the time. I understand Simon, who was Haley's older brother by 2 years, was most put out by his sister being showered magnanimously with gifts from his uncle, while he got nothing. I think he felt very hurt that his uncle excluded him in everything, and unfairly favoured his little sister." Mrs. MacDonald was exceedingly worried about her brother Victor's unorthodox behaviour towards her daughter, which was not natural. She warned Haley not to ever be alone with Uncle Victor, because he could not be trusted. Mrs. MacDonald also informed the police that when growing up as a girl, she vividly recalled her brother Victor's unnatural, unhealthy obsession with young girls between the ages of 4 and 8, which was perverse, she believed. Her parents believed this was true, and so they also referred their son Victor for counselling. Not that it helped, of course. Mrs. MacDonald told little Haley to stay away from Uncle Victor, and when she did this, her daughter's reaction was to become very upset, claiming that Uncle Victor was always so nice to her and had given her so many lovely gifts, so she couldn't comprehend why her parents didn't like her uncle. Mrs. MacDonald instinctively knew that Victor was grooming her little girl. She told Victor in no uncertain terms to stay the hell away from little Haley, and if he so much as laid a finger on her daughter, she'd go straight to the police and have him arrested. She believed her warnings to her brother Victor had worked a treat, for she hadn't heard so much as a beep out of Uncle Victor in many months, even though he lived in this run-down old shack about 10 minutes away from the family home, and had become a bit of a recluse. Mrs. MacDonald began to relax, feeling as if her brother Victor no longer imposed a threat towards her daughter Haley, because he'd kept to his promise and stayed away from her girl. "Oh, dear me," said Avril. "So Mrs. MacDonald's just got a little complacent, it would seem, not realizing that her brother's interest in little Haley had not really faded away, as she believed it obviously had." "That's it, Avril. I do think she got complacent. She must have cursed herself for that," Hilda admitted. "On the day Haley went missing, Haley was playing outside the MacDonald house on her pretty pink bike with her brother Simon, and she had her doll Annabelle with her, of course. Simon went outside for a brief moment to get a glass of orange cordial, because he claimed he was thirsty, and when he returned to resume riding his bicycle with his sister, she had all but vanished. His sister's pink bicycle was abandoned, found lying on the side of the road outside the family home. Mrs. MacDonald drove instinctively straight over to her brother Victor's house, believing at once that he must have abducted her daughter. But the dishevelled run-down house he lived in was all but locked up, and his car appeared to be missing.
The police later questioned Uncle Victor at great length about the disappearance of little Haley. It would seem a couple of young 6-year-old girls that lived in the Canmore area claimed that Haley's uncle had given them sweets and tried to give them a ride in his clapped-out old car to get ice cream on one occasion. But Haley's uncle had run away the moments the kids' parents had seen a stranger talking to their girls and had told their children to come back into the house at once. Those parents did not know how lucky they were to have their eye on the ball, as in a place like Canmore, you wouldn't expect something like this to happen, someone picking up your daughter like that, because the predators looming around usually were not of the human kind. When the police searched Victor's house, they discovered pictures of little Haley blown up all over the walls of his bedroom, done in huge collages. When Mrs. MacDonald's observed the extent of Victor's depravity towards her daughter Haley, it had made her skin crawl. The police claimed they'd never witnessed someone with such an obsessed perversion towards a little girl. So even before they cross-examined Victor, they already knew they had their man. Mrs. MacDonald's confessed that had the police not taken her brother Victor into custody, she'd have put a bullet through his head herself and be damned with the consequences of her actions, for in that moment she hated her brother Victor more than anybody else in the world. Even her own parents wanted to kill their son because he'd harmed their beloved granddaughter. Mrs. MacDonald's mother, Mrs. Periwinkle, said,
"I always knew Victor had problems with little girls, and it concerned me greatly. I went to the police about it many times, But he'd never done anything to harm a child. So, of course, nothing was done about it. I gave him counselling and stuff like that, but none of it helped. My son was definitely sick in the head, rather deranged, but never in my wildest dreams did I ever envisage he would harm his own niece. It's absolutely abhorrent what he did."
Everyone pretty much knew Haley wasn't alive, and Victor, of course, confessed to what he'd done. But when he took the police to see Haley's shallow grave, it had all but been emptied, and even Victor seemed surprised by this. They never did find the body of little Haley, but some claimed that because the grave was so shallow, only covered with a scattering of leaves, a wild animal had probably taken her body away, and as she was such a small child, moving her body would have been relatively easy for a coyote or something like that.
"Oh, what a dreadfully sad story," said Avril. "Very sad indeed. So what happened to the MacDonalds after all of this? I can't imagine what poor Mrs. MacDonald went through losing a daughter. It must have been too dreadful for her. Did they move away from Canmore? I guess if it had been me, that's what I would have done. You don't want to wake up every morning and be brutally reminded of your dreadful loss, do you?"
"Yes, they did move away as it happens. Both the MacDonalds and the Periwinkles returned to Scotland and settled down in the town of Edinburgh. I understand she went on to have over 6 more children, Mrs. MacDonald's, I mean. But I don't think she ever got over the loss of little Haley. But I'm pretty sure the doll your daughter found is Haley's."
"Well, if that's the case, and the doll really did belong to Haley, who is long since deceased, shouldn't I hand the doll over to the police? I mean, it's a relic from the 80s, is it not? And goodness knows why it was found on a country road of all things by my daughter."
"But what would you say to the police?" asked Hilda. "That your daughter found an old doll that might have belonged to a girl that was abducted and killed in the early 80s by a man who's now deceased? I'm quite sure they won't be remotely interested. Besides, it might not even be the little girl's doll, although I do believe it is, but that's my personal opinion. But the fact that it looks identical to the doll in the photograph means absolutely nothing. I mean, think about it. They probably produced hundreds of these dolls at the time."
"I hadn't thought of it like that, Hilda. You make a very good point," said Avril. "Thank you for sharing this astonishing story with me. I've been needing some inspiration for my writing, and this story has landed in my lap like manna from heaven. And I've already got some new ideas as to what to write about. Who would have thought a doll that my daughter picked up on the road on a rainy day would end up, Well, inspiring me of all things.
Well, I'm very glad that at least some good can come out of Haley's tragedy, said Hilda reflectively. I can't wait to read your next book, Avril. I know it's going to be brilliant. Oh, by the way, I was wondering, I hope you don't mind if I take the kids for a picnic in the Woodgrove. I hope I have your permission to do so. I mean, I'll make sure we stick to the path, of course. You walk Jellicoe there every morning, don't you? And I think during the daytime, the Woodgrove is pretty safe. But I'll take some bear spray with me just to be sure. But as far as I'm concerned, we don't have any problems with bears around here.
Well, if there are any bears around and they smell your picnic, my advice to you would be to leave the food and evacuate the woods at once. And the bears would go straight to the food and leave you the hell alone, if that were to happen. But that is unlikely, because let's just say on my walks, I've never encountered any signs of bears being anywhere around here.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And yes, that's what I would do, said Hilda.
Good girl. Then of course you can take the kids for a picnic. It's a lovely idea, and my children adore picnics. Besides, it's so magnificent in the Woodgrove. I'm sure they'd love it there.
Good, it's settled then, said Hilda, looking pleased. Laurie's account. I was only 6 years old when me, my mother Avril, and my brother Sam went to stay at the Birchwoods cabin close to the town of Canmore. I am 20 years old now, but when it comes to my young life, I barely remember much about those early years, and yet I remember my trip to the Birchwoods cabin as a 6-year-old girl with a vibrant, crystal-clear clarity, as if those unorthodox events happened only yesterday. Maybe there are some memories that hang deep in your recall, leaving an indelible imprint like a scar on your skin that can never ever be erased. I may still be relatively young now, but I know I will take these memories of mine that I have as a 6-year-old girl straight down to the grave with me. Growing up, I had huge problems with my bladder that always wanted to inappropriately misbehave at the most inopportune times. And let's just say it would make my mother as mad as a March hare, as on every single road trip without exception, I always seemed to need to stop and to hold up the entire family in order to answer a call of nature. It was raining hard on the day we were trying to locate the mysterious whereabouts of the Birchwood cabin, which really was for us like looking for a needle in a haystack. Everything was so badly marked, and the undulating scenery and tall lofty trees often obscured some of those side roads. I recall I was exceedingly upset we were leaving Toronto behind for 6 long weeks to live in the countryside. I didn't want to miss out on kindergarten and time spent with my friends, nor did I want to leave my father behind. My mother said she was struggling to be creative at home, as far as writing her book was concerned, and her publisher was hard on her back, demanding to know what her next story was about. My mother had been fobbing her off with all kinds of tall stories. I do know that our next-door neighbour, Mrs. Sanders, would disturb my mother tirelessly every day, claiming to be searching for her cat, Bo Peep, that seemed to be forever going walkabout. I guess my mother felt that there was no peace in our household with so many distractions and interruptions, so getting away would help her focus more on the book she intended to write. On this agonizingly long road trip, which had laboriously lasted over 5 tiresome days, with various stops at bed and breakfasts along the way, I suddenly realized I couldn't hold my bladder for a second longer. My mother was not remotely impressed by this, as 2 hours earlier we'd stopped at a gas station, and I had told my mother then and there that I really didn't need to go. Now I was insisting that we had to stop at once. My mother knew she couldn't refuse my urgent request, because she had little faith in the reliability of my bladder. Let's just say I'd once relieved myself all over her back seat, leaving a stench for weeks that refused to abate. My mother was so embarrassed by the smell in her car that I'd left behind, that she blamed it on our golden Labrador Jellicoe, who had never peed on anything in the house or car a day in his life. My mother stopped her car and told me to be quick about it. I could tell by her indignant tone of voice that stopping for me was a huge hindrance and big annoyance. I remember climbing out of the car in the pouring rain and being unable to hold my bladder a second longer, So in the middle of the road, in front of my mother's Hyundai, I had pulled down my pants and made quite a spectacle of myself. When I had finished with my business, that was when I saw the bear man. At that young, impressionable age, I had no way of knowing that the creature I was actually seeing was a 9-foot-tall male Bigfoot, and I only realized that many years later. I described him to my mother as a bear man because he was covered in long flowing dark hair and looked rather like a black bear. Powerfully built, I mean, but at the same time he was also a man with distinctive humanoid features and a very human face that reminded me rather of an Indian warrior. I remember being incredibly delighted to see the bear man, with the same kind of enthusiastic joy I would have been to see Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. As for me, the bear man was like one of my favourite children's storybook characters, which was why on the road I waved at him madly and skipped ebulliently, as if I'd reconnected with a long-lost old friend that I hadn't seen for a long while. My unorthodox behaviour would leave my mother and brother rather perturbed, when later they asked me who I'd been waving at, and when I told them it was the bear man, they thought I was making up wild, fanciful, fictitious stories, and I let them believe that, because it was just too much to explain who the bear man actually was. He had been standing there behind the tree and looking at me through dark, very kind eyes. I remember even though he was a distance away from our car, I could sense his great kindness. I knew he was massive and very intimidating in size, but that did not scare me at all. I was standing in the rain, and the deluge was causing the water to trickle down my cheeks, to sting my eyes, and saturated my clothes, so in no time at all the pretty flowery dress that I was wearing at the time was clinging to me like a rag, almost as if I had just dived into a swimming pool and succeeded in getting sopping wet. I could hear the bear man talk to me in my head. I didn't find that remotely odd, that I was experiencing some kind of telepathic exchange with him. It seemed for me the most natural thing in the world for him to be talking to me in this rather unusual manner. For when you're 6 years old, the world of your imagination and the natural world can merge together pretty seamlessly, so nothing seems strange to you when something unusual bursts onto the scene of your life. The bear man informed me in my head that a little girl called Haley wanted me to keep her doll, and had chosen me to watch over it and have it as my own. I remember thinking, what girl was he talking about? Because I didn't know anybody called Haley. And what doll was he referring to? But then the voice informed me that the doll was lying in a puddle on the road, and that Haley wanted me to retrieve the doll from the water and take it with me home so that I could watch over it. I remember looking at the puddles on the road, and one of them was glistening like silver tinsel, and so I found myself immediately drawn to the puddle, rather like iron filings to a magnet. That was when I physically observed a girl reflected in the puddle in the water, like a face in the mirror. At first I thought I was looking at myself, and then I realized I was looking at a girl who looked astonishingly like me. I was quite taken aback by her reflection. She wore her hair in 2 big blonde ponytails and had big blue eyes. She told me her doll was called Annabel. Her name was Haley, and that she had chosen me to take care of her doll. She said she was 6 years old. I took the doll from the puddle and brought her into the car with me. I could see she was very pretty, although she was extremely dirty. My mother was not remotely amused by my actions. She told me she'd take me to Canmore in the morning and buy me a lovely new doll if I would kindly dispose of the doll I was carrying and toss it back in the road where it belonged. The look of disgust on her face was tangible. Anyone would have thought I'd brought a piece of roadkill into the car with me. She claimed the doll stank to high heaven, and she didn't want the filthy thing in the car with us. My brother Sam also made a great deal of fun out of me, taunting me at every opportunity, telling me the doll that I was carrying was disgusting. But I knew the girl I'd seen in the puddle in the road wanted me to have charge over her doll, and I was going to keep my promise to her. And besides, I really did like the doll, and Haley had said she wanted me to keep her. She said she could rest now that I was watching over her doll, without worrying about her. She said where she was from she had another doll just like Annabel, but she didn't want to abandon her one on this side of life. I wasn't sure what she meant by that at the time. I told my mother I wanted to keep the doll and that her name was Annabel. For reasons I cannot explain, I became very attached to Annabel, much more so than I have ever been towards any other doll I've owned before. It was almost as if Haley's passion for her doll had rubbed off on me. I told my mother very stubbornly that no, I was keeping this doll, and that all that was needed was for her to be cleaned up. It would seem the more my mother tried to persuade me to part with the doll, the more fiercely determined I became to keep her. When we arrived at the Birchwoods cabin, it was the prettiest place I'd ever seen in my entire life. It really was like something out of a fairy tale. Luckily by this time the incessant rain had stopped. The sun began to reveal itself through the clouds. There was a vaporous mist swirling around the snow-covered peaks of the mountains that made it look all the more mysterious and intriguing. I remember being completely spellbound by the dazzling scenery, and suddenly I was not so sad that I had come here after all. I had met a nice girl in a puddle called Haley. I had met the bear man, and I had a brand new doll, and now I was about to stay in this prepossessing cabin. There were tall, lofty trees stretching over a wide mountainous area, and the extensive, very beguiling hilly valley was covered in all kinds of alpine flowers of every imaginable colour. I had falsely assumed that coming to a place in the countryside would be rather boring, but even at 6 years old, I was completely spellbound and mesmerised by those spectacular views, for I had never been to such a pretty place before. When we arrived at the cabin, a young woman, who is the age that I am now, came dashing out of the cabin. Her face was animated, and the way she looked at my mother was the way some teenagers look at pop idols, like when they meet Justin Timberlake for the very first time. I soon realised this young woman, whose name was Hilda McFreese, had been given charge over us, and would watch over us while my mother worked on her book. It turned out that Hilda was a big fan of my mother's work. She'd actually read a couple of my mother's novels, and thought my mother was some kind of movie star. She couldn't comprehend why my mother didn't flaunt her successes as a writer, and why she hid her name behind a pseudonym. I really did like Hilda McFreese, because I'd never met anyone like her before. She had a bubbly, effervescent personality, and was so humorous she made us laugh all the time. She taught us to bake, and she helped me and my brother with our lessons. One day she told us we were going for a picnic in the woods, and I asked her if I could help her prepare the stuff for our picnic, and she said yes, and so I did. We industriously packed a big picnic basket with all kinds of yummy treats that are very appealing to a 6-year-old palate, shall we say, from peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to gummy bears, chocolate chip cookies, sausage rolls, and bottles of Hilda's homemade lemonade. We carefully packed our picnic basket on the back of the Birchwoods 4-seater ATV, and Hilda drove us enthusiastically through the woods, down some of those long, windy paths that were very bumpy and rather precarious. I felt as if we were embarking on an exciting, intrepid adventure, as we whizzed past trees and over rocky inclines, and then finally we found the most perfect picnic spot for our picnic. It was beside a gushing stream, where water obstreperously marched over the jutting rocks, showering them with a foaming white discharge. There were overhanging trees that were brushing the surface of the water with their leafy green boughs. They looked like hunchback old men, dressed in green, searching the water for a lost coin. The first thing we did after Hilda parked her ATV under a tree was make a dash for the water, for we waited for no one. We could not get to the water fast enough. I eagerly threw off my shoes and socks, so they landed rather precariously on the bank, and then me and my brother began to paddle in the water, chasing after everything that moved. There were these tiny little silvery fish that swam past us at the speed of light, which we desperately tried to catch with our hands, with no success whatsoever. Our futile, somewhat pathetic attempts to snatch a fish made us giggle like crazy. The surface of the water shimmered, and for a brief moment I was certain I saw the little girl Haley on the surface of the water, smiling at me through her reflection. She was there one moment and gone the next, and I was sure I'd imagined her. I had left Annabel, my doll, on the front seat of the ATV, because I thought she'd be safe there, as I took her everywhere I went. Me and my brother continued to play for a while, and when we realised there was no way we were going to catch a silver fish, we returned to the picnic. Hilda unrolled a large tartan picnic blanket and spread it across the ground. She began to open up various Tupperware containers of food, so we ate happily as we watched the water thundering over the rocks. It was so peaceful being by the stream and listening to the gushing sound of the water. I felt incredibly happy being in this beautiful place, surrounded by the cheerful trills of the bird song. Then it happened. My big desire to empty my bladder overcame me, and I told Hilda that I needed to go and pee-pee.
But you went before we came, said Hilda. I made sure you went before we came, because I know what your bladder's like. Why do you need to go now? Is it urgent? Yes, it is. I've got to go, I said, clutching my dress to my abdomen, to warn Hilda that if she didn't let me go off now and find a tree to relieve myself behind, I'd go then and there all over the picnic. She's always like this, my brother explained. Laurie always needs to go and pee-pee. Well, you'd better go then, hadn't you? Said Hilda. Shall I come with you? She asked me. She's not a baby. She can go on her own, Sam interjected. Well then go, said Hilda, and please don't take long, or I'll worry about you. You're my responsibility, don't forget that. I hurried off to find a suitable tree, whereby I could relieve myself, but I felt annoyed with my bladder for showing me up yet again. It was humiliating always needing to go to the toilet like this, as if my entire life was dictated to by a very weak bladder that kept badly misbehaving. I found a suitable tree and proceeded to get on with business, and that was when I saw him. It was the bear man. I was so delighted to see him again, especially close up and personal like this. I was not remotely afraid of him, not even for a second, because growing up I collected all kinds of bears, and my largest, most beloved bear in my bedroom was bigger than I was. He was a black and white panda bear, and was my absolute favourite. My mother had purchased him when driving through a small town in Vermont, and there it was in the window. I pointed it to my mother and told her I really wanted it. My mother never normally gave in to my childlike whims, so what she did next surprised even me. She stopped the car, told me to stay there, and returned with this oversized panda bear that I absolutely loved. I remember her saying, I don't know why I stopped to buy the panda for you, but I couldn't resist. I thought he was absolutely gorgeous. Would you believe it? The very nice man who owns the boutique told me he only put the panda bear in the window 2 minutes ago. So maybe it was meant to be yours, Laurie. Now here I was staring at the bear man in the flesh, who far outrivaled my very big panda at home, who compared to the bear man looked like a tiny teddy. The bear man was impressively big, in every sense of the word. So Herculean in size, he'd never have been able to walk through a front door straight, without crouching, and even the width of his rather robust body would have made such an endeavour a tight squeeze for him. At 6 years old, meeting the bear man was extremely exciting for me, as it would likely have been for any other girl my age, for I certainly didn't feel remotely uncomfortable in his presence. I guess if I'd been in my teenage years, my reaction to the bear man would be one more of fear than of fascination. But at 6 years old, seeing the bear man made me feel as if all my Christmases and birthdays had come at once. The bear man was indicating for me to follow him, and I began to giggle. He was making me laugh. I obediently followed him, even though my mother had drummed into me since I was old enough to understand the meaning of the word, not to go off with strangers at all. But the bear man was not a stranger to me at all. I saw him as a very good friend. I felt no hesitancy or doubt. I just followed him into the woods, not stopping to think for a single second about how upset Hilda or my brother Sam would become if I didn't return to our picnic. At 6, I lived in the moment, as kids that age so often do. I wanted to know exactly what the bear man had to show me. He picked me up and threw me onto his powerful shoulders, and I was delighted to be riding on his back, with a breeze blowing against my skin. I felt like a kid in the fairground, having the time of my life. I grabbed onto the bear man's hair like a horse's mane, and giggled like mad, as he sashayed through the woods, his nimble body almost floating over everything. The bear man smelt of pine needles and wood, and I loved his earthy scent. Looking back, I don't recall ever asking the bear man where we were going. I trusted him implicitly. My childlike instincts didn't doubt that he was a faithful friend.
It was when we reached this beautiful tree, like no other in the woodgrove, statuesque and tall, its verdant leafy boughs towering up into the sky, like a majestic church steeple. That was when the bear man put me down, very gently, as if I was as delicate as a porcelain doll. He spoke to me like he had done to me when I was relieving myself on that sequestered country road, where he told me I'd find my doll Annabel in a puddle, which I most certainly did, although at the time she was covered in mud and looked like something the dog had dragged in. It was on this road that I had seen a flash vision of a girl who looked just like me, who had told me her name was Haley. She had asked me to look after her doll, which I had done so faithfully since we had come to the Birchwoods cabin. I didn't know why Haley had appeared to me in a flash like that, on a puddle in a country road, but never once did I question the peculiarity of such an unorthodox meeting, as in my 6-year-old brain I didn't speculate about the weirdness of any given situation. The communication between me and the bear man remained completely telepathic and flowed so naturally. The bear man informed me that Haley had asked him to bring me to this place. It was at this point I remember the bear man telling me that Haley had asked him to bring me to this place, to bring me to this very magnificent-looking tree.
You mean the girl that I saw on the road in the puddle? I asked him. The girl who asked me to look after her doll.
That's right, said the bear man. Haley wanted you to see where her body lies sleeping, well, her bones, that is, under this beautiful, magnificent tree. There isn't a tree in the grove that is quite like it.
But why is she here?
I asked, looking befuddled. Because a very bad man, a long time ago, buried her body in a shallow grave that was covered with pitiful leaves. The coyotes and wild animals would have dragged her away to eat, so my father intervened. He removed her body and brought it to be buried here. He wanted her to be buried under this magnificent tree, and she wanted to be buried here too. So this is where her bones lie, and she loves this very special tree. I stared rather absent-mindedly at the tree, trying to take in everything that the bear man had told me. And that was when Haley appeared before me, like she'd done on the road. Only this time she wasn't a reflection. Indeed, she was larger than life. She looked like any regular girl that I might meet. She looked solid, and there was nothing translucent about her at all. She spoke to me in my head like the bear man had, and said,
Laurie, thank you so much for coming here. I wanted you to know where I'm buried. I'm happy to show you my secret place. I just don't want to be forgotten, you see. People have long since forgotten about me, but I know that you won't. You will remember me. I just want to say thank you for looking after Annabel. She's my gift to you. And when you play with her, I hope you'll think about me. And with that, Haley just vanished before my eyes. Why did she go away? I asked the bear man. I wanted to play with her. Why did she leave? Why didn't she stay?
She went away because she doesn't belong here anymore. She belongs somewhere else, somewhere much more beautiful than this place. She comes to visit her resting place every now and then, but she's living in another world, and she's very happy where she is. She wanted me to show you her special place. She wanted you to know all about it, because you are so much like her, and she wanted someone like herself to know where her body now lies. She also wanted you to look after her doll. She really likes the place my father selected for her, as this is a very special tree indeed. Now I better take you back from where I found you, or your friends might start to worry about you. And with that the bear man lifted me up gently and placed me on the back of his shoulders. I was delighted to be on his back again, because I was going to thoroughly enjoy another ride through the woods, and riding on the bear man's back was the best fun I'd ever experienced in a long time. It was certainly better than riding a regular pony, as the bear man ran so smoothly, with a nimble gait, so much so I felt as if I was floating on air. Finally, when we reached the tree where I'd first relieved myself, he put me down, and then before I could say anything, he was gone. Moments later, I found myself face to face with Hilda, and she looked far from amused. Her face was as white as a fluffy cloud in the sky, and her eyes were filled with the fire of her indignation. She grabbed me furiously and pulled me away from the tree.
You think this is funny, do you, Laurie? Because if this is your idea of a joke, it's not funny. All this time when we've been calling out for you, wondering where the hell you've got to, you've been crouching behind the tree, laughing at us, as if all this is a great big game to you, of hide and seek or something that only you are playing. We've been so worried about you. How could you do this to us? We thought something terrible had happened to you. Imagine if I had to go back to the cabin and tell your mother you were missing. She'd never ever forgive me.
But Hilda, you don't understand. I went for a ride with the bear man. He wanted to show me a very special tree. The best and most beautiful tree I've ever seen.
Hilda glared at me furiously.
Don't make excuses, Laurie. I know you're playing silly games with us, and it's not remotely funny. What is wrong with you? Don't go making up silly stories to excuse your bad behaviour. You are absolutely... Oh, I don't know what to say. It's absolutely shocking playing a game like that with us. You should be ashamed of yourself. Thoroughly ashamed.
But Hilda, I'm not lying, it's true. The bear man wanted to show me the special tree.
Hilda's whole body shook with fury, and when I told her about the bear man and the special tree, she seemed even more affronted, as if she believed I was making up stories. She grabbed my hand so roughly that I nearly fell over, and took me straight back to the picnic spot, where my brother Sam was putting the picnic stuff away, back in the basket. When he saw me, he got up to his feet, looking both relieved and annoyed at the same time. There was a very pronounced frown on his face.
Where was she? He asked Hilda. She was playing a game of hide and seek with us, Sam, said Hilda in disgust. I found her crouching behind the tree. All this while we've been searching for her, calling out her name, wondering where she is. Can you believe it, Sam? She's just been laughing at us, said Hilda furiously. What a cheek! After I do this nice thing for the both of you. I thought it would be a special treat bringing you both here for a picnic in the woods. And then you start playing your silly games with us, Laurie.
But I wasn't playing any games, I insisted. The bear man took me to the special tree. I went for a ride on his very big back. It was ever so fun. Much better than riding a pony.
What's wrong with you, Laurie?
Said Sam in disgust. Why do you always make up such stupid stories? Nobody believes a word of what you're saying. You always lie. But I'm not lying, Sam. I can show you the special tree if you like. I'll take you there. I don't want to see your stupid tree, Laurie. We were having a nice picnic. Hilda went to a lot of trouble on our account. And you start playing one of your stupid games. It's not funny, Laurie.
Let's go, said Hilda. Wait until I tell your mother what you did, Laurie. She's not going to be remotely amused.
Please don't tell her, I cried out. She'll never let us go on a picnic again.
You should have thought about that, Laurie, before you decided to play hide and seek with us.
I was feeling very sorry for myself when I climbed back onto the ATV. My brother Sam was snarling at me in disgust, as if he thought I was a lower form of pond life. He was mumbling under his breath about how I always liked to ruin everything and make up nonsensical stories. Hilda deliberately ignored me as she got into the driving seat of the ATV. Once we'd gathered our picnic things together, she whisked us through the trees on the back of the ATV and took us back to the cabin at record speed. I clutched little Annabel tightly to my chest for some form of comfort. I knew, of course, what was coming next, and I was preparing myself for the trouble I was about to face with my mother. If Hilda was angry with me, it was nothing on how my mother would react when she finally had words with me. Averil Frieseland's account. I was seated very happily at the large worn-out desk, with its overlay of green leather in the birchwood study. My eyes were pinned on my computer, while Jellicoe lay across my feet, like the most wonderful leg warmer. Jellicoe was devoted to me, following me everywhere I went. and I considered him to be a very reliable writing companion. I began to tap away at the computer, rather like a music composer seated at the piano, creating a brand new tune. I'm glad to say the words of my story had begun to flow so seamlessly, as if I was creating a masterpiece of note. It would seem ever since my 6-year-old daughter Laurie had discovered that god-awful looking doll lying in the middle of a sequestered country road, when the rain was coming down in sheets. Little did I know that the ugly doll that I had encouraged her to abandon would actually be the trigger that it would inspire me to write again. And I knew that this story I was going to write would be the best on record. Hilda was taking care of my children's needs, cleaning and cooking for me. She seemed to believe that the doll Laurie had found was exactly the same doll that belonged to the missing girl Haley MacDonald, whose uncle claimed to have killed her and disposed of her body in a shallow grave in 1982. Although the young girl's body was never found, the police knew unequivocally that the uncle was guilty of this duplicitous crime, and he was locked away in prison for life. When Hilda had shown me the newspaper article, I had been firing on all cylinders, as if shooting stars were lighting up my imagination and sparking off a plethora of new ideas that I had gladly welcomed. I was feeling extremely satisfied with the trajectory of my story. It would seem my mother had been absolutely right. Coming here to the Birchwood cabin had awoken the dormant creativity inside me, like a massive bear finally waking up after a long hibernation. I did, of course, feel extremely bad that my husband was back at home in Toronto, left to his own devices, where he had to fend for himself. I had learnt that to relieve his boredom in our absence, he had industriously even repainted our rusty old postbox, which had to be a good thing. He said he was missing us terribly, but I knew our being apart from each other was actually healthy for our relationship, for it made us appreciate each other all the more. I was enjoying spending time in the countryside, being swaddled by the fabulous views of the natural world. The serene quietness and the crisp air gave me plenty of time to reflect on my work. Jellicoe was enjoying his morning walks in the woodgrove, and would bound after anything that moved, from rabbits to squirrels and even the occasional deer. It was as I was sitting comfortably at my computer, I heard the familiar sound of the ATV rolling back to the cabin, far earlier than I expected. This was a surprise to me because I thought my children would be thoroughly enjoying spending the rest of the afternoon at the woodgrove, sitting by the beautiful gurgling stream, and playing happily by the water. The ATV was being parked next to my white Hyundai in the carport. I could hear my son Sam's shrill voice. He was saying something disparaging about his sister Laurie, although what he was saying I couldn't be sure. Jellicoe sat up on his haunches excitedly and began to bark, thumping his tail on the ground, as he always liked it when my kids returned to the cabin. "That's right, they're back, Jellicoe. Sooner than I thought they'd be. I hope they enjoyed their picnic in the woods." I glanced out of the window briefly and observed Hilda marching ahead of my children. She looked incredibly angry, almost as if her feathers had been badly ruffled. I remember inwardly groaning. I knew my kids had done something to upset her. Sam was scrambling behind Hilda, carrying the picnic basket in his hands, and he looked exceedingly annoyed, as if something had really irked him. Then there was my daughter Laurie, timidly lagging behind the two of them into the house, clutching her doll Annabel tightly to her chest, and looking sheepishly subdued. I am no expert in reading body language by any manner of means, but I knew instinctively then and there that my little daughter Laurie had been the cause of this great upset, and had been responsible for making Hilda very angry. By the looks of things, she had succeeded in spoiling their picnic. I wondered what she could have done. In my imagination, I could envisage little Laurie picking up a dead rabbit she found lying on the footpath and insisting on allowing it to join them for their picnic. That would put an end to things pretty quickly, I thought. I didn't have to wonder for long as to why Hilda and Sam looked so terribly glum when they returned to the cabin, for my question was about to be answered. Moments later I could hear a little knock at the door of my study. I knew, of course, that it was likely to be Hilda, who was about to inform me as to what Laurie had done to upset the apple cart. And right now I didn't want to know. Not when I was on such a roll with my story, and being interrupted so rudely like this was the last thing I wanted. Couldn't Hilda leave what Laurie had done on the back burner for once? Did she have to disturb me like this? "Come in," I said, my voice a little snappy. Hilda came in through the doorway looking a little bashful. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, Avril, but I needed to have a quick chat with you if you don't mind about Laurie. She's really upset me today. Actually, she's upset both me and Sam very much." "Sit down," I said to Hilda, beckoning for her to take a seat opposite me. "What has she done?" I asked. "I can see from your expression, Hilda, that the picnic you planned wasn't a success. Why do I have this feeling that Laurie spoilt everything for you? My little princess does know how to ruffle people's feathers. She does it to me all the time, I can assure you." "Well, it would have been a success if Laurie didn't ruin it all for us. Why did she have to spoil everything, Avril? We were having so much fun, and then she goes and plays one of her stupid games. What is wrong with your daughter, Avril?" "What exactly did she do, Hilda?" I asked, bracing myself for what Hilda was about to tell me. "Laurie wanted to relieve herself," said Hilda. I told her to go to the loo before we even left on the ATV for the picnic in the woods. But then, soon after we'd eaten our lunch, she wanted to go again. What is wrong with your daughter's bladder? Why does she need to keep going to the loo all the time? I've never seen anything like it before." I sighed. "I'm very sorry, Hilda. She's always been like that." "Oh, don't tell me. She didn't relieve herself over the picnic blanket. Please, God, no," I said. "No, you can relax, Avril. It wasn't exactly like that. Although, in hindsight, if she had relieved herself over the picnic blanket, that would have been better than what she did. I told her to go and relieve herself behind a tree somewhere, but to come back quickly, and she didn't." "What do you mean she didn't?" I asked. "Well, Laurie was gone for ages, wasn't she? Eventually I knew something was up because she never came back. I began to decidedly panic. I thought something terrible had happened to her, Avril. Me and Sam were calling her name and looking for her everywhere, and she was nowhere to be found. We thought she was gone. I was so affrighted, Avril," said Hilda, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I had visions of coming back here to the cabin and telling you, Avril, that Laurie was gone. I was so worried. You have no idea." At this, Hilda put her hand on her heart, took in a few deep breaths to express the extreme panic she had felt when my daughter had failed to return to the picnic. My heart naturally went out to her, for I knew how she must have felt being responsible for both of my children when one of them seemingly appears to vanish under her charge. "Oh, I'm so dreadfully sorry, Hilda. I must apologize for my daughter. You must have been put through hell. But thank God you found her. Where exactly was she?" "That's just it, Avril. Laurie was deliberately hiding from us, playing her own silly little game of hide-and-go-seek, while we were practically having heart attacks, worrying about where she was. I was practically losing it, Avril. I then found her crouched behind the tree, a long while later. She was laughing at us, Avril. It was all one great big joke to her. She looked as if she'd been having a great big adventure at our expense. We were looking for her for ages and ages, and all the time she was hiding and playing with us. And if that wasn't bad enough, Avril, she made up this bizarre, nonsensical story about a bear man taking her on a ride on his back in the woods to visit a beautiful tree. I'm telling you, Avril, I was so incensed. I wanted to slap your daughter across the face really, really hard, but I restrained myself from doing such things, because you never hit children. But I don't mind admitting I was tempted to do so. She put us through so much stress, Avril, and at one point Sam was almost in tears. Laurie deliberately hid from us and then made up these crazy stories. You've got to speak to her. She can't do anything like this again. She just can't." "Don't get so upset, Hilda. None of this is your fault. I hope you realize that. You're doing a marvellous job in taking care of my children. And if the truth be told, I could not possibly manage without your help. And while I'm thanking you, I'd like to also thank you for the newspaper article you showed me the other day about Haley MacDonald's enigmatic disappearance. And of course the doll my daughter found on the road, that we believe once belonged to Haley.
Well, it's enabled me to make some remarkable inroads into my story. And it's just, well, let's just say I'm on the roll now.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. But why does Laurie do this? It's really mean of her, Avril.
But of course it's mean of her, Hilda. And it won't happen again. I will make absolutely sure of that. Don't you worry about it. You send my daughter into my office right away, and I'll have some words with her.
Moments later, my daughter had been ushered into my office by a satisfied-looking Hilda. Laurie looked like a frightened little lamb that was about to be led to the slaughter. She stared up at me through wide eyes, all the while clutching her doll tightly to her chest, as if the doll could offer her a measure of comfort. She knew she was in trouble, certainly by the indignant expression on my face, but seeing her anxiety made me soften substantially and feel less angry towards her. Although I continued to express myself formidably, I didn't want Laurie to cause Hilda any more upset. I was so grateful having Hilda working for us, and the last thing I wanted was for her to give in her notice on account of Laurie's childish behaviour. I beckoned for Laurie to take a seat. Her bony knees began to tremble behind the dress she was wearing.
Now, what do you have to say for yourself, young lady? I've been hearing from Hilda about your behaviour at lunch this afternoon. I understand you caused a great deal upset, and your brother was also very upset by you. He was almost in tears, I believe. He was so worried about your whereabouts. You caused both of them a great deal of distress. Why did you not answer them when they were calling your name? You gave Hilda quite the scare. She thought something quite terrible had happened to you, and all the while you were deliberately hiding behind a tree, watching them panic. It's as if you got a great deal of pleasure out of it all, and they were increasingly alarmed by your absence. It's not a joke, love. Toying with people's emotions like this is not a kind thing to do. You put Hilda through a great deal of stress, and that is not fair on her. You can never do this again, do you understand, Laurie? I cannot and will not put up with this juvenile nonsense. You're a big girl now. You're 6 years old. You should know how to conduct yourself better.
But, Mummy, it wasn't like that. The bear man took me for a ride in the woods. He wanted to show me where the really pretty tree was.
At this point in my conversation with my daughter, I could feel the anger burgeoning in my heart. Why could Laurie not take responsibility for what she had done? I know she was only 6, but even so, she'd been a very naughty girl, and now she was making all kinds of fictitious excuses, and my patience, I'm afraid to say, was beginning to wear thin.
This is not remotely funny, Laurie. I can understand why Hilda got so upset. You're making me upset as well. You think this is all a joke, don't you? And you seem to enjoy lying and making up these fictitious stories that are not true. You know that the bear man is not real.
But he is real, Mum. He took me to see where Haley MacDonald is buried. He said Haley wanted me to see her resting place. She's the one that asked me to look after her doll that I found in the puddle on the road. Don't you remember?
When my daughter said this, my blood ran cold. Laurie was talking about a girl that went missing in 1982. How could she possibly know about Haley MacDonald? I hadn't shared the details of this enigmatic case with anyone, apart from Hilda, of course. How could she know about Haley and her disappearance? And now she was talking about a fictitious bear man taking her to see Haley's resting place. None of this made any rational sense to me.
Who told you about Haley MacDonald?
I asked my daughter rather gingerly.
No one told me about her. Well, maybe the bear man did. I met her on that road, remember? That was when I found the doll lying in a puddle, when it was raining. The bear man was hiding behind the tree. He told me I'd find the doll in the puddle, which I did. And that was when I saw Haley for the first time. She was in the puddle. She was lying in a reflection on the water. She was there 1 minute and she was gone the next, like a great big flash of lightning. I don't know where she went. She was telling me to take care of her doll, and she told me to call her doll Annabelle, because that's her doll's name.
Go on. What else happened, love?
Well, when I went to relieve myself in the woods on our picnic, I saw the bear man again. I was so pleased to see him, because the last time I saw him, I was on that country road. He was beckoning for me to follow him. He told me he wanted to show me Haley's resting place. He told me a very bad man buried her in a shallow grave, and that his father found her body and buried it under the special tree in the woods. The bear man said his father was worried that Haley's body would be dragged away by nasty coyotes or eaten by wild animals. He said his dad wanted to bury Haley under the best tree in the grove. The bear man gave me a ride on his back to show me where the pretty tree was. When we got to the tree, I saw Haley at the tree. This time she was solid like you or me, not just a reflection. I was so happy to see her, Mummy, because I could have a friend my age to play with, like at kindergarten. The bear man told me that Haley couldn't stay with me, 'cause she had to do things in the other world, and that she was very happy where she was. Haley told me she wanted me to keep her doll and look after it. She said when I play with her doll, that I would be able to think of her. She said she wanted to show me her resting place, because she never wanted to be forgotten, but she likes being under that special tree. The bear man says her bones are there, but he said her, what was it? Oh, yeah, astral body, that's right. He said her astral body is in another world. Mummy, the bear man told me we have two bodies, like a Russian doll does. One is in the other. He says when we leave one body, we have another body, but the second body, he says, does not belong to this world. It belongs to another place, you see.
Who is this bear man? I asked my daughter, wondering where a bear man could possibly be fitting into this rather bizarre, nonsensical story. But how could I possibly doubt what my daughter Laurie was telling me, given she knew nothing about Haley MacDonald, whose body was buried in a shallow grave by her Uncle Victor, who had killed her and then disposed of her body. My daughter claimed to know where Haley's bones could be found. I was dumbfounded by this revelation and didn't know what to make of it. My anger had subsided, as I knew my daughter was telling me the truth. How could she have possibly known about Haley MacDonald, who had a doll called Annabel that looked identical to hers? How could she know that Haley had been killed by a bad man, who was of course her Uncle Victor, and buried in a shallow grave? My daughter claimed the bear man's father had taken the body of little Haley and buried it under a magnificent tree in the woodgrove, for he didn't want her remains to be dragged off and eaten by coyotes, and even in the article it did suggest that the police believed that her body had been eaten by wild animals. Looking at my daughter and the earnest expression on her face, I found myself believing every word of her story, although I had no comprehension who the bear man was. If my daughter claimed to have physically seen Haley's ghost, then maybe the bear man was my daughter's spiritual guide or something. I knew Laurie was impressionable. She was only 6 years old, and young children can often see into the spiritual realm. So maybe she'd seen things that others failed to see. Maybe Haley had a special psychic gift. I do recall when Haley was on that sequestered country road, she seemed rather fascinated by the puddle in the middle of the road.
You believe me, Mummy, do you? She asked me in a low whisper. I promise you I'm telling the truth. Cross my heart.
I believe you, I told my daughter. I opened my drawer to pull out a newspaper article, the one that Hilda had given me. I pointed to the girl in the picture. Do you know who this girl is? I asked my daughter. Laurie's face lit up.
That's Haley MacDonald, and that's Annabel. She's holding the doll that she gave me in the photograph. She loves Annabel so much. She wants me to keep her. She says when I play with Annabel, she wants me to remember her. She doesn't want to be forgotten, you see.
Well, you're right about this, Laurie, I told her. The girl in the photograph goes by the name of Haley MacDonald. One day in 1982, while playing out on her bicycle, a very bad man hurt her. The man was her Uncle Victor. Anyway, to cut a long story short, Victor was locked away, put in prison, and he died there. But he admitted to what he'd done. It would seem he was very remorseful for the fact that he had hurt little Haley, and confessed immediately to the crime. Of course, he cooperated with the police at the time and took them to the shallow grave, where he'd buried her. But Haley was no longer in that grave. The police naturally thought wild animals must have dragged her body away. A search was conducted of the entire area, in the hope that the remains of Haley's body would be found, like a gnawed bone or something like that. I gather they even brought cadaver dogs along to search for the girl's remains. But sadly the trail went completely cold.
What are cadaver dogs, Mummy?
Asked Laurie. Well, they're very clever dogs that can pick up the scent or the whereabouts of a dead body. Most dogs have a very marvellous sense of smell, unlike us human beings. Anyway, cadaver dogs were given some of Laurie's scent, and they followed the scent to the shallow grave, where they did find a pink fluffy cardigan of Haley MacDonald's, that the mother said had belonged to her daughter. I gather when she found the cardigan, she burst into tears. I think she realised then and there that her daughter was truly gone, and it broke the poor woman's heart.
But Mrs. MacDonald shouldn't be sad, because Haley's still alive. She's in her other body, her new body. The bear man says she has a body called an astral body. He says we have two bodies that fit into each other like a Russian doll. And when we leave our normal body behind, we have another body. But that body can't live in this world. It can only live in another world. The bear man told me Haley likes to visit the tree all the time where she's buried. But he said most people wouldn't be able to see Haley. He says I got a very special gift, because I can see things that others can't see. You think our dog Malaga visits the tree where we buried her at home, do you? Because I think it would be nice if he visits his body under the tree.
I'm sure Malaga visits his resting place, I assured my daughter. For one thing, he wants to keep an eye on you, does he not? Now I want you to do something for me, love, I said to my daughter. Will you take me to this pretty tree tomorrow?
You want to see Haley's special place? Asked my daughter, looking decidedly pleased.
But of course I do. I'm very keen to see it.
I had in mind I'd take a trowel with me and dig up the area, and when I found Haley's bones, I would notify the police so that the MacDonalds who lived in Scotland could be notified that their long-lost daughter's remains had been found. My daughter looked at me with wide eyes. The bear man took me to the tree, but what if I can't find it?
Well, we can try our very best, can't we? Do you think you can remember what the tree looks like?
At this, my daughter's face brightened. I'll never forget that tree, Mummy. It's the most beautiful tree I've ever seen. The following morning I informed Hilda that I was taking Laurie on the ATV into the woods, for we had something we needed to do as mother and daughter together. I didn't go into detail about the true nature of our spontaneous little trip.
I want you to look after Sam and Jellicoe for me, I told Hilda.
But why, Avril? Why are you taking Laurie into the woods? Please don't tell me you believe her story about the bear man and the pretty tree. You're the last person I'd ever believe would be duped by her own daughter like this. Did you even bother to scold her yesterday for wandering off in the way she did and causing us so much stress? I noticed when Laurie came out of your office yesterday, she didn't look like someone who had been told off for misbehaving badly. On the contrary, she looked heartily relieved, as if she'd escaped a scolding.
Look, Hilda, let's not go there, shall we? I mean, honestly, I don't want to cry over spilt milk. Just let me do this one thing, will you? Just so you know. I do have my reasons, and they're very good.
Hilda sighed. All right, I'll look after Jellicoe and Sam for you. But why do I have this funny feeling, Avril, that you're hiding something from me?
I don't know what you're talking about, Hilda. I'm not hiding anything from you. I just want to take my daughter for a ride on the ATV in the woods. Is that all right with you?
Hilda nodded, and I made absolutely certain that she hadn't seen me sneak a shovel onto the back of the ATV,
because she'd be wondering what I was going to do with it. If my daughter could point out the tree to me, then maybe I could dig up the little girl's remains and lead the police to the missing girl's corpse, although I didn't know what wild story I would spin, and how I would explain how I randomly came upon the deceased corpse of the young girl. I decided I might pretend that Jellicoe had not been able to stop digging the ground, and being curious as to what it was that had grabbed my dog's undivided interest, I had dug up the ground, only to uncover the bones lying entrenched in the soil. It seemed like a credible story, if not a little far-fetched. There was no way in hell that I was going to inform the police that a ghost and a bear man had led my daughter to the gravesite. I didn't want anyone to think I was as mad as a March hare. I was hoping that my daughter would be able to lead me to the mysterious tree, but as we drove through the woodgrove, Laurie kept telling me she recognised nothing, and that she would recognise the tree at once if she were to see it. The journey through the woodgrove was frustrating, to say the very least, and I was about to give up when Laurie cried out,
Mummy! Mummy, that's the tree! It's over there! That's the tree!
When I laid eyes on this spectacular tree, I knew it was the most beautiful tree that I had ever beheld. It even put a Californian redwood tree into the shade. I can see why you found this tree so special, love, I told my daughter. It's a very special tree. Laurie watched me picking up my shovel and walking over to the tree. The ground under the tree was widespread, and I realized I didn't have a clue where to start digging. There were so many burgeoning roots that erupted from beneath the ground, and I knew that digging up this ground would cost me some blood, sweat, and tears. But I told myself that my gallant efforts would be rewarded, as surely this little girl would want to be buried in a marked grave. And wouldn't it be great for Haley's parents to be able to have a proper burial for their daughter? With a resolute determination, I began to thrust my shovel into the ground, and within seconds I was sweating and breathing furiously. This was certainly not a job for the faint-hearted, but come hell or high water, I would do it, for little Haley's sake, of course. I had visions of how relieved Haley's parents would ultimately be about my extraordinary discovery, and as for the police, would they not be happy that the whereabouts of a missing girl, all the way back from the 1980s, had finally been located?
What are you doing with the trowel, Mummy?
Laurie asked me, her face crinkling in horror.
You're not going to dig up Haley's bones, are you? You can't do that, Mummy. Haley likes being with this tree. She doesn't want to be moved away from here. This is her special place.
Look, love, Haley MacDonald has been missing for many long years, since the 1980s, I'll have you know. If I dig her up, her parents will be overjoyed to at long last discover the whereabouts of their missing child's bones. The only problem is I don't know where on earth to start digging, and the ground is unyielding and hard.
As I began to dig up the ground, I heaved and grunted. My daughter sat under the tree with her legs crossed. She was clutching Annabel to her chest. She watched me dig with a big frown on her face. She kept saying,
Haley won't be happy, Mummy, that you're messing up her special tree.
I ignored my daughter's protests, for I was determined to find the bones of little Haley MacDonald. But was I looking for a needle in a haystack? I rather suspected I was, and there were no guarantees, of course, that her bones would ever be recovered. All of a sudden I had this overwhelming sense that I was not alone, and that was when I heard a little girl's voice in my head telling me not to mess up her special tree. But I willfully ignored the voice and told myself I had imagined it. But the little voice was persistent, and it wasn't Laurie's voice. It had said to me, Please don't move my bones. I want to stay here. I continued to dig, but my strength was waning. The more I dug, the more resistant the ground became, and the burgeoning roots that spread out beneath the earth were fighting against me, and my best efforts were pitiful. I was beginning to seriously wish my husband was here. He might have made light work of this digging. All of a sudden I could feel a presence, a sizable presence, and I knew that someone was there, but I saw nothing. To tell you the truth, the experience gave me the chills, and that was when I saw him. I was so stunned by what I was observing that the trowel I was carrying simply slipped out of my hand like butter. I was far too shocked to scream or cry out, because in truth I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Standing there only feet away from me was a strapping male Bigfoot. I thought I had to be dreaming, until my little girl ran up to the Bigfoot and threw her arms around him and said,
Mummy, this is the bear man I was telling you about.
She then turned around to the bear man and said,
Can I have a ride on your back again, like last time?
The bear man looked at my daughter and shook his head, as if he understood perfectly her every word, but his focus was intent on me. I could see his piercing dark eyes were drilling through me, and he didn't look remotely happy. He shook his head and ambled over towards me. At this point I was so terrified I thought I was going to faint and collapse on the ground. But he took no notice of me and picked up my trowel. He then turned around to look at me, and in my head I heard the words, in a very masculine, stern voice, saying, Do not desecrate a place of rest. I stared at him, and in my mind my thoughts were a jumble, but it was as if the Bigfoot could read them, because I heard him say, Haley is happy to be buried by her special tree. She does not want you or need you to remove her bones. She wants to stay here. She's with her parents in the other world, for they also have crossed over to the other side. So why do you want to do this very bad thing? It's not right to disturb the bones of the sleeping. The Bigfoot threw my trowel into the underbrush, nodded at my daughter, and finally glided away. And that was me firmly put in my place.
I told you, Mummy, said my daughter Laurie. Haley likes her special tree. She doesn't want to be disturbed.
Well, we better not disturb her then, I said, guiding my daughter Laurie back to the ATV and driving straight back to the Birchwood cabin, unable to get my head around what had just transpired, but delighted that this outlandish event had inspired my imagination. And it certainly did, because the next book I wrote at the Birchwood cabin became an international bestseller, and I credit its outstanding success to a little doll lying in a puddle on a country road, a ghost child called Haley, and a bear man whom I now realize was a Herculean-sized Bigfoot who seemed to have an understanding of the unseen realm. I was to find out later that Haley's parents had indeed passed away, and so if Haley wanted to remain under the tree, I would honor her wishes. I did go back to the tree on the anniversary of Haley's death every year to lay flowers on the ground, as I wanted the little girl to realize that she was not forgotten. And all these years later, my daughter still has Haley's special doll. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.